All right. So I've gone ahead and started up the stream, and
So I don't have. Oh wait, we're streaming it.
yeah, I'm streaming it.
Oh, is it for like us to review later, or are we actually going to be like podcasting?
Yeah. I don't know.
Both. Okay.
I'm turning on the stream so we have a recording, and if anyone else wants to see that recording later, we can do it.
Okay.
So that's the idea. But yeah, so I figured today we would go over the first two chapters of Peak. Of course, the book is essentially about. I would say, kind of, given that we've all three of us have kind of read through most of it already, I can confidently say that it is primarily a book about like building mental models and how that is like the most powerful thing that a person can do.
Yes.
So, it's pretty cool stuff. But yeah, I figured we would go over the introduction, chapter 1, kind of talk about some implications, see if there are any applications to League, and go on our merry way. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like
Yeah.
a plan.
Cool. So, in the introduction, he opens up with kind of a story on perfect pitch, right? And the whole thing that, for a long time it was thought to be a totally innate talent. You either were born with it or you weren't. But then they kind of realized that you were more likely to have it if you were trained like at an early age to get it. Later on in the introduction, he mentions that the brain's adaptability kind of changes over time. There are certain skills that are easier to learn when you're young, and that get, not impossible, but harder as you get older. And
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of wondering, just as kind of a topic of discussion, what in League is easier to learn when you're younger? What would be your predictions of things that would be easier to learn when you're younger?
I don't. So the thing is that like, what year did Peak come out again? Was it
Let me check.
I think 2015.
I've got the book
2016.
right here, so
Something like 2016 or 2015.
yeah, 2016.
So this is kind of like on the cusp of what they're discovering neuroplasticity at this point during the early 2010s, like the late 2000s. And so like a lot of people used to think that it's like, hey, no, you just like get past a certain age, you just can't learn it anymore. That's just how life works. But it turns out that I think actually even Peak goes over this at some point, the neuroplasticity of cab drivers, where
Yes,
I don't know if
and how
this
it
was in the
changes
early
over time.
chapters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We'll
So-
get to that next week, but definitely it's relevant. So
The idea being that like even though you're not young, your brain can still change. Maybe it doesn't change as fast because
yeah,
young children have more quote unquote unassigned neurons or however he described it, and
Sure, something like
yeah,
that.
sure, but like I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to things that'll be much easier to learn as a young child. At least in my experience, I still see other people still learning, being able to learn pretty quickly.
Yeah,
I mean, the methods we have to learn are much different, of course, but
The question is not implying that it gets harder to learn as we grow older. Just that it's some things could be faster. Just like you learning learning first pitch. Like you can only learn to get first pitch during your first in your early years, or after, or if you want to learn it much later, it's through a very different training. And so,
yeah, because the implication is that you don't have absolute perfect pitch. What you have is really damn good relative
yes,
pitch.
I've read the book. I've
Yeah.
read the book, don't worry.
yeah.
No, I was asking you the question. I wasn't saying that.
So,
So
so as far as the science on neuroplasticity, are we at a point now where there's like more research on it than what was available at the time of this publishing?
There's
the only thing that we know is
some,
that we don't know shit.
but Yeah, Dilga's right, where it's like, it's such a new field that it's like, we really don't even know what we don't know yet, I think.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense to me. So,
I'm personally stricken by the idea that, like, because for me, a lot of people will come to me and be like, "Hey, I'm too old to learn this." Like, "Oh, I'm 20, I'm mid-20s. I can't be a good League player anymore. I don't have the reaction time. I don't have this.
Yeah.
It's impossible." Yet, I see that it's like a 6-7 year difference, maybe 10-year difference from 18 to 25 or whatever. It's like from 15 to 25, whatever. And it's like, I don't think that the brain changes so much from 15 to 25. Like, it changes a lot. I'm not gonna say it doesn't, but to be able to say that, I think it's a pretty big assumption to say that, hey, I'm not 15 anymore, so I can't learn things anymore.
No, definitely not can't. I don't think that. And any argument that involves can't learn is valid. It's just a matter of like easier or more difficult, right? It's like the neuroplasticity will speed it up, or it'll make it less effortful to do it. But it's never going to. First of all, it's never going to put in the work for you. You can be a kid and still learn absolutely nothing if you're intent on doing so. And on top of that, it's definitely there are skills that I think get easier even as you get older, and you have like more tools and more mental models with which to approach things, and especially the more complex stuff, I think, involving like deep decision making and stuff like that. I mean, it's if you just don't have the practice to even have the base skills required to build into the larger skill, then obviously that's going to be more difficult to learn. But when you look at things like building muscle memory for mapping like button presses to actions, right? It seems to me like that might be something that's actually, and that's just like gaming and using computers as a skill in general, you know what I mean? Like, it seems to me, I've kind of noticed that there's like a generational gap thing, right? Where people who didn't grow up with computers tend to have a more difficult time learning computers, Like, if you put my 50-year-old mom in front of a keyboard and ask her to learn how to type like 200 words a minute, and you put like a 10-year-old in front of a keyboard and ask him to learn to type 200 words a minute, my prediction would be that the kid would get it faster, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, kind of what he's getting at in terms of this like neuroplasticity thing, right? It's like there are, I would imagine, things to do with kind of and then he talks a little later in one of the other chapters about like joint flexibility and certain things like that like you just literally it gets solidified at a certain age, and if you haven't kind of loosened it at that point, then it fully develops into so there's like a lot of physical stuff. I feel like a lot of physical stuff and a lot of like muscle memory kind of stuff that
I think the important part of your question is like, because you can learn like perfect pitch between like the ages of, I think it's 2 to 5 years old, something like that. But if we're taking the same consideration with League in that same age window, I think learning computer skills at that age, well, no, it's actually not that I think. I've studied it a bit with some doctors that have studied the impact of screens on children, and it's absolutely terrible for their development in general.
Yeah,
for
their cognitive and social development.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's the screens specifically, like the actual screen usage, or do you think it's the technology, like the apps and the other things they do with it? Like, I'm wondering if
it's more, it's less the screens that have a bad effect than more of the fact that they are using the screen as opposed to touching the rest of the world. Because
I see. So it's like they're limiting their exposure.
Yeah, like young children learn by touching a lot and putting things in their mouth, and so that's something that it doesn't work with a computer or electronics.
Put a tablet in their mouth. Now I understand math.
Yeah, exactly.
And since like that's completely limits because it's a very like self-contained world, what's inside of a computer, and you interact with it in a like completely different way from the rest of the world. And since what's pictured inside the game makes sense in the context of the outside world, I don't think there would be like easier stuff to learn from the kid. Or
I
maybe
completely agree.
they would just see the game in a completely different way than we do, because they don't have the same frame of reference of the outside world.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about like really young children. I'm saying that a lot of what we see with kid prodigies in League is like kids in the 14 to 18 range. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they're
Viper's little brother, by the way.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like they get to a point where they are, they have enough cognitive skills to really start to be able to grapple with some of the bigger concepts in the game, but their neuroplasticity is so low that I would feel like things like maybe damage foresight, maybe quick reaction speeds, maybe like I was saying before, kind of like literally like mapping like, okay, this button does this on this champion, this button does this on this other champion, you know what I mean? It's like that kind of thing, I feel like, is those are the things that I would expect might be easier for a teenager than like a young adult, right?
The idea of developing the muscle memory, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's probably, I agree. It's the mechanical skill is probably what you learn. Like maybe I don't know if it's easier, but actually it's the decision making skill and all the complex thought about how to strategize around the game and all these things probably are easier to learn once you're older and more experienced in general with
So
yeah, you get young prodigies that are mechanical, basically.
Definitely. One thing I've definitely noticed too is that like a lot of these prodigies, there was a post recently of a 12-year-old who is Viper's little brother, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, this guy's so good," and it's like he's really good, right? But he also has a really world-class level teacher, right? And his brother, who's also a challenger player. So it's like a lot of the prodigies that we see in League didn't get that to themselves, right? They got there because they had somebody in their corner helping them, kind of like Mozart with his dad, kind of like Tiger Woods with his dad,
of course,
right? So it's like part of the thing is that like people don't see the whole picture. Like, yeah, the prodigy's really fucking good and it's amazing, but he also had the support network he needed. He had the amount of deliberate practice,
like top tier.
And it's that difference between deliberate practice and purposeful practice, which we'll be getting to in the next chapter. Right? And
wait. Okay. I was like, wait, are we not going to talk about purposeful practice? Am I fucking wrong? And do I not have the right?
No, it's kind of the three different levels, right? The naive practice, the purposeful practice, and the deliberate practice. But so definitely seems like the like mechanical skills, I think, are something that are probably easier to pick up at a young age. I couldn't really tell you how to train damage foresight. You know what I mean? It's just kind of something you got or you don't at this point in our understanding of the game. You know what I mean? And
the only way I would train it is by running through the actual numbers, which can lead to problems. But somebody that young, it may be better for them to see the actual numbers than to try to feel it out. It depends on the person, I think.
Sure.
I would actually see it the other way around. Because, well, you can build your damage foresight by using the numbers, but it's more like the accumulation of all the experiences of champions in specific conditions, and how much damage they do. So it's more like closer to mechanical skill, as in stuff that builds intuitively, right?
There's hundreds of millions of situations, so it's like, so building up situations is super important. I agree. But then, we can also make that faster by maybe grouping up situations, like running through the numbers and saying, okay, me as this champion beats this, and this champion at level 1. Doesn't really matter by how much, unless it's by like 10. But
I agree.
And then you basically build up a mental model from a different angle, right? Yeah. So instead of building up a bunch of experience, you can kind of branch out, I guess. It's kind of like, I don't know if you guys understand what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. The thing that I'm realizing listening to this too is that it reminds me a lot of like kind of the difference between like really really good relative pitch versus perfect pitch, right? Like just incredible intuitive damage foresight seems easier to build as a kid. You can build something that looks a lot like really good damage foresight by running through the numbers and doing it deliberately and going through it there. But it seems kind of like a different beast. You know what I mean?
It is entirely. I agree.
It does the same thing, but it's achieving it in a different way. And
right. So
yeah, it's like that kind of thing. Because I don't know about you guys, but I started on League when I was still in high school, right? And the game was like just coming out at that point. So it, I think those early couple of seasons that I was playing, even though I was playing really just kind of for fun, it was obviously quite formative in that I think I developed a lot of the core of my really, really, really basic League skills during that time, right? You know, I really didn't have any competitive gaming experience before I got into League. Like, I was like a console player. Like, I did like Spyro and Zelda and like crap like that, right? Like, I never did any competitive sports. I didn't do any competitive anything until I got into League and then started being more and more interested in that side of things. So yeah, it seems like those are maybe some things that potentially could be easier or different to learn at a younger age than as you get older. So
definitely, I agree with you.
Yeah. So kind of moving on to the next point. As far as perfect pitch goes, there was then the whole thing that they figured out that it was that speaking a tonal language growing up actually helped you develop it, and people started questioning, like, okay, is this a trait? Is this a skill? Like, what's going on here? And finally, Ayako Sakakibara did the experiment and trained a bunch of kids to recognize chords, and literally all of them developed perfect pitch within 2 years of training. And this, of course,
I remember the study.
Heavily supports that it is a skill that can be developed, not an innate trait that you either have or do not at birth. Because, you know, to have, I don't know, it was like 24 kids or something crazy like that. Like,
yeah,
one program and all of it. Like,
yeah.
like, come on, guy. Like, no. It's
yeah. It's like saying something super common, just because, like, you know, it's like, or super rare, and then be like, literally everybody. It's like, you know, it's like that's hard to make
those fantastic artists during the Italian Renaissance. Yeah, it was just a good year for artists in Italy. Like,
yeah,
what? Like no, get out of here, right?
So
That's not a thing.
And it's like, yeah, like, yeah, it's just weird to me that, like, in my own life and my ability to train my own relative pitch to a very high level, to have people be like, "Oh, you're so talented," you know, I wish I could do that. And It's like, I worked really hard. Like, I don't have, you know, any sort of talent in my opinion. What?
You want some of that on here?
Oh, I'm all good. Thank you, though.
You don't want it?
He doesn't want
it. I didn't realize lunch was coming so soon. My bad, guys.
Nice.
But yeah, so lunch. You know, I'd spend hours at the piano, you know, drilling through chords, trying to remember minor, major, or whatever. And, like, yeah, it came kind of quickly to me, I think, because I was so passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, but that's not talent. That's practice.
No, right? that's me still practicing a lot, right? I just had more willing to practice, and it's kind of a slap in the face when somebody's like, "Oh, you're so talented. I wish I could do that." I was like, "Well, you can. You just, you know, have to be dedicated." And it's like, it almost feels like it devalues the effort I put in.
Yeah,
I have a really interesting kind of thing there. One of the things that gets mentioned in the book is, like, you know, the only real talent is like a willingness to work hard, right? And like, I don't know, like, that actually sounds like kind of legit to me, right? So how about that for a talking point? Like, is like discipline and passion and motivation something that can be developed, or is it basically like you either have got like the hardworking gene or you haven't got it?
Oh, it's 100% developed.
Really? Okay.
I think it's
Well,
developed as well.
yeah, it's like the fruit of your upbringing, right? Like what your parents encourage you to do early on, or your entourage, or whoever you're.
So, I don't know if this book mentions it, but there's a study where they took two sets of kids. One, they always told you were so intelligent, and then the other half they told you worked really hard. And what they found was that the kids who told that they were really intelligent eventually stopped trying so hard, because the implication was is if I'm intelligent and I fuck this up, then I'm no longer intelligent. Whereas the kids who worked hard, if they couldn't get something right, they would keep going back at it because they knew, they were working hard. And so, like, the implication is that, like, the way you talk to your child can actually develop someone who's fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And so, like,
building mental models of what it is to learn. Yep.
what it means to learn and work hard, yeah.
Yeah, that seems legit to me. And of course, shout out to Carol Dweck and all of her fantastic research on growth mindset and static mindset and that kind of whole branch of things. I imagine that at some point here I'll get around to reading some of that literature, but it's good stuff.
On top of that, like, people are more willing to work on things they like, right? So, like, like, if you like a certain subject in school, you'll work way harder at that than maybe something else. And it maybe looks like to somebody else you're being lazy as hell, but, like, the thing that they're working on is, something that you wouldn't like to work on. So it's like it kind of like crosses wires a bit. And so the things that people work on really hard are things that they're really passionate about. And I think a lot of people struggle to find what they really like enough to be able to sit down and work on it for several hours a day.
Well, and there's also the fact that when you start bad at something, you don't get encouraged to keep on going. Like,
right.
It's either like through intentional like demotivation or just people like talking you down.
You have to like what you're doing enough to be able to suffer for being bad at it.
Yeah.
Or you have to start at being like better than the others to start thinking you're good. Like you don't have to start being good, just better than the others.
You can
and
rely
then
on
you
your
ride
talent.
from there.
Yeah.
And I will say that, they say that talent doesn't exist, and I did believe that for a while, but I think that there are some cases where it's like somebody just starts at a higher level than somebody else just because of their past experiences. And,
yeah, exactly. I think that kind of talent exists. Like, the skills do transfer. Like,
yeah. So, like, you can start being... I've seen players who start StarCraft, they're really high level in StarCraft, or like LS, for example. He's been a high level gamer for pretty much ever. Really good at Hearthstone, TFT, really good at League, StarCraft, and they just kind of all Magic, right? So, like, it's not that he's like super talented or whatever. It's just that, like, he's picked this field of study where, like, all these skills really transfer together really well, and now he's got these, like, really insane mental models that just help him get really good at anything really fast.
What it takes. Like, that's what it is to me. In skills in video games do transfer. Like, there's the thing called video game literacy. Where, like, I could study that a bit on my previous girlfriend, where she was like she liked games, but she didn't play much. Like, she played casual games a lot, but she did try getting into some less casual games, let's say. And the difference in the stuff that was obvious to me as being like rules that are true in every video games, and the fact that it wasn't for her, just made me like very clearly see what it meant to have transferred the skills that should transfer.
Right, and oftentimes we'll take that stuff for granted too. It's like we won't even think that somebody will struggle with something that we consider so basic, like even just like moving your mouse, like Adrian was saying,
especially moving the mouse, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even using the keyboard, where it's like you put somebody who's 50 and never played a video game and try to make them play League, they're just not going to do anything. They're not going to even know what buttons to press. You'll tell them to press the right click, and they'll be like, I don't know, what? Right? So it's like...
What is a click?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Who is a click?
What is a click? How is a click?
How... Nobody asks how is the click.
Yeah.
Or click.
Why is a click?
Why is a click? Yes.
For click.
Most importantly.
So,
but I also, going back to what Dilgo was saying, is I've noticed that learning League, and then now incorporating my knowledge of Clausewitz and Sun Tzu into my mental models for League and in general. Like I've noticed that even in the last like week or so, I've just gotten way better at other strategy games just from being able to think a little bit faster about like what actually makes sense to do from League, from all the other mental models. So it's like, for me, I used to think I was really bad at strategy games, but through playing a lot of League and learning from you guys and you know those mental models I created with those things I posted in educational chat have actually just floored me in terms of how much better I've gotten without really even playing the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, work away from the table has made a tremendous impact that you never could have anticipated.
Like, I'm still having problems with certain habits, but those are habits that I can break. But I would, like, last week or so, 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have noticed those habits ever, and I thought I was landing fine and just getting fucked. But it turns out, no, I'm every 10 seconds, every 3 seconds, I'm just losing full lane pressure, and it's like, how can you expect to win? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's what I've noticed too, is that it's like, if you want to get good at really one thing, you got to be able to be good at all the things around it too.
It's true.
What do you mean by that?
Like,
Exactly.
like for me, like if you're only playing League of Legends and you don't really learn, you know, how other strategy games work, it's a lot harder just to be really good at League of Legends because like the way your mental models work are for League of Legends specifically, rather than like maybe throughout the whole field.
Okay. Yeah, knowledge of the field in general gives broader perspectives.
Right. So like for me as a musician, I play piano, but I also learn theory as a basis, so I can also learn pretty much any other instrument. I can read any instrument. It doesn't matter. I can read transpositions. I can tell you, you know, how to play most instruments. I can't play them myself, but I could teach a basic musician how to teach pretty much any instrument because of the way I learned, you know, from broad
As a
rather than
bassist, I can't
specific.
even play my own instrument properly.
Got him.
I will say that when I was practicing every day, I was really close to being what I felt was like a virtuosic pianist, but just like the really small things, it's like it's harder and harder to improve because the adjustments you have to make are smaller and smaller.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
So, continuing on with the introduction, the authors assert that a certain amount of one's ability is based on genetics, especially in certain fields, right? You know, when you get into physical sports and things like that, the size and shape of your body does matter. You know, I mean, it's literally it's like what champion are you playing in League of Legends, right? You know, and there are certain matchups that are better than others, and it's just the way that it is, right? But like the vast majority of it is practice. It comes down to practice. Experts widely agree that practice is the key. You talk to what's his face, who the professional basketball player, and he's like, I hate that people call me talented. That pisses me off. And I'm like, preach, brother.
Oh, is that Kobe?
This is it's like
was that
really
Kobe or was that Jordan?
I don't think it was either one. I think it was some other guy. He was mentioned in the book. I should.
Was it in there? I just don't even. I don't have my notes, so I don't even frickin' remember.
Remember whether it was. I don't think it was. I think it was in the introduction, but.
Is it Steph Curry? I don't remember.
I remember what it's McMullen. Or yeah, it's Ray Allen. Ray Allen. So,
okay, yeah, no,
yeah. So it's
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, I've argued with a lot of people in my life. He told McMullen, when people say God bless me with a beautiful jump shot, it really pisses me off. I tell those people, don't undermine the work I've put in every day. Not some days, every day. Ask anyone who I've been on a team with who shoots the most. Go back to Seattle and Milwaukee and ask them. The answer is man, that's like some inspiring crap right there. Like, I like it.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's the same thing that like surgeons have to go through. They save your family member, and they're like, "Thank God." And it's like, oh, I went through medical school and a residency to save your life, and thank God.
Yeah.
Old God can confirm he did everything.
Freaking got him, by the way. So,
And I'm sure they understand it to some level. Like I mean, people are religious, and that's totally fine. Yet it's still kind of like it's the slap in the face, you know.
Yeah, 100%.
To be honest, I'm not sure they like. Well, maybe I don't know, but they really probably like don't give it too much value. You know, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to
Thing,
imagine what goes on in a surgery room. You know what I mean? Because like even the medical
True.
shows aren't even that correct. Like it's like. But
Absolutely
I'm gonna be right back.
true.
I have to run to the restroom. I'll be like 2 minutes.
All right.
No, you're not allowed to do that.
So,
As always.
yeah, so to kind of move on to the next point, it seems like, the implication, right, is that it turns out that talent is really kind of more just what you start with, right? Kind of like we said before, it's like, if you have
Skills that transfer.
Yeah, if you have transfer skills, then they can sometimes start you at different places. The environment that you grew up in, all sorts of different stuff like that can cause you to start in different places. But far more important than that is the practice. And the practice is going to determine where you end rather than where you start. And where you end is what really matters, right? Another one of the really good quotes from the book is, we now understand that there's no such thing as a predefined ability. The brain is adaptable, and training can create skills, such as perfect pitch, that did not exist before. This is a game changer because learning how becomes a way of creating abilities, rather than of bringing people to the point where they can take advantage of their innate ones. Right? It's essentially arguing against the idea that your talent is like a hard cap on your ability. Right? That if you ever get to a certain point where you're just stuck, it just means, well, you're just screwed now. That's as good as you can get. There's no getting better, and you're just donezo, right?
By the way, did you get that Mori was going to the toilet? Right.
Yeah.
You go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I just got back, so I all I heard was the last part about like if you don't have talent, you're fucked.
Yeah. No, that's
true.
exactly what we're saying, and Ewan specifically were who we were actually talking about in that case.
And you're like so fucked.
You keep talking about how you're playing into Caitlyn and you haven't gotten it for however many years, right? And that means that you probably will never get it, and you should probably just quit the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I mean you're right.
So actually,
I mean, thank you for finally agreeing with me. I've been
yeah, I
trying
mean,
so
I ran out of energy.
I ran out of ideas, man. You're
I ran out
friends.
of ideas. You just screwed, right? So the quote was,
Good
we now
luck, get out.
understand. Yeah. So the quote from the book was, we now understand that there's no such thing as a predefined ability. The brain is adaptable, and training can create skills, such as perfect pitch, that did not exist before. This is a game changer because learning now becomes a way of creating abilities rather than of bringing people to the point where they can take advantage of their innate ones, right? Kind of hardcore against the idea of that there is a cap on talent, right? Talent is, as I said to Dilga, it's we agree it's your transfer skills, right? Things that happen to have been partially learned in other areas of your life that you bring with you to the table the first time you try something are going to determine where you start, but they're never going to determine where you finish. Where you finish is going to be determined by your practice and your effort, right? And
It's like they say, talent gets you so far.
yeah, exactly. But there are people, even in our server today, I mean, I'll point a finger at Layla, right, who believe that talent is a cap, right? So I don't think that this is something that is necessarily super well known by the general public or by the League public, right? That where you and I think it has serious implications for how someone should deal with a slump or a plateau, right? A lot of people will hit their first really bad plateau, and they're just yeah, no, I'm fucked. I guess this is just as good as I'm ever going to be, and improvement is meaningless.
Yeah, I see it all the time on.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
On
people do
Reddit
this
everywhere.
Yeah, like
all the
Reddit and
time.
Summoner School.
Yeah, you
like,
just
oh,
have
I
to go
hit
to Summoner
five,
School
and
and
I'm
you
not
can
stuck,
understand
like,
how people believe that. You just see it.
Yeah.
So it's
And then people
really
agree with them. They're like, oh, if you haven't climbed for 2 years, good as you can get, dude.
I guess
it's like,
you're
you know,
done.
it's like-
Yeah, it's okay, sure.
I mean, that's been happening to me. I used to have my mental leaks used to be a lot worse, and so like I would get tilted and ask people for help, and they'd just be like, "Well, I mean, if you couldn't get out of low elo for the first year of your game life, you'll never get out of low elo. Nobody's
Exactly.
ever done that."
Nobody's
like-
ever done that before.
And they're like, "Well, you've tried so hard from up to now. How do you know you can actually do it?" I was like, "Damn, dude."
Got him.
I ended up leaving that.
Damn,
It was like it's like
Daniel.
ended up being super toxic. Like
Yeah.
the way
Absolutely.
people treat others about like.
Yeah, summer school tends to be encouraging toxic behavior in that way, like in not openly toxic behavior, but like long term.
Yeah, it's like under the
unhelpful
surface, fucking
behavior.
rank shaming type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
They say that they disallow it, but as long as if you're like in with the mods and you're like mod friends, they don't give a fuck what you do. I know
Usually
because I
resentment.
used to be in that circle, and I ended up leaving because they just weren't doing anything about the people who were just being assholes.
Yeah, it's I have my own issues with the summer school people, but
That's
Let's,
neither
we
here nor
shouldn't-
there.
We
so.
shouldn't talk too much crap about them. Then I won't be able to post a VOD there. XD. Nah, I probably won't even.
Yeah, I'm not expecting you to.
Let's
but,
not do that
yeah.
and say we did.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So the next kind of talking point is sort of the end of the introduction, and kind of introduces a lot of what the core content of the book is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the quote is he was talking about some other kind of like performance oriented books that he's like seen or read, and he says but sometimes these books leave the impression that heartfelt desire and hard work alone will lead to improved performance. Just keep working at it and you'll get there. And this is wrong. The right sort of practice, carried out over a sufficient period of time, leads to improvement, nothing else. I think that's really powerful, right? It's, there's like two aspects of it, right? The just keep working at it and you'll get there is like kind of correct, but it's only correct if you're doing the right kind of practice. And having some kind of an understanding of like how long a skill is supposed to take to develop, and having some kind of idea of like, does like a practice methodology work or not, and how can you tell whether it's working or not? Like these are like really unbelievably important things. And it immediately leads us into chapter 1 and kind of talking about the difference between naive practice and purposeful practice. But I thought this was like a really nice kind of a summary of the whole thing. So did anyone else
tried to break my head against the, like hit my head against the wall until it finally collapses, I can confirm that sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't.
Most of the time though, you're going to end up wanting to try differently, not harder, right?
Yeah.
If something isn't working for you, then most of the time that means that you haven't got the right kind of practice, not that you are a talentless individual, and not that you just need to try harder. Those are very rarely the culprit. And I say very rarely, and I hedge myself like that because there are definitely times that it is actually like that, right? I think, Maury, like you and I have when we first started working together, right? Like you had kind of lost all faith in like everything that you'd read, you know what I mean? And you just were like on this like binge of like try something. And I don't think that you had actually given the things that you needed to do like a fair shake, right?
Right, and I expected results a lot faster than I think that I should have. Mostly, I think because with most things, like with music, for example, it didn't really matter what it was in music; it just kind of clicked immediately. But I didn't have that sort of mental model with League, and so like for me, it was kind of like don't have that mental model with League, right, and other strategy games, which I'm starting to develop now.
Mm-hmm.
That's like I don't see myself learning it instantly, or it's like I don't understand, I guess, how I'm supposed to learn when I don't get it instantly, rather.
And I think a lot of that has to do with that when we look at like the way that music like pedagogy has developed, right? It's really advanced at this point. You know what I mean? Like we are like fully into the stage where like deliberate practice is possible,
Right.
for music. But in League, this is like a
Nowhere
10-year-old game. We're not even close. We have no idea what the correct way to train different skills are. We're still in that stage where people are just kind of blindly flailing around in the dark, trying different crap until something sticks, you know? So, I mean, at least that's what I'm doing. I can't speak for any other coaches out there, but like that's what I'm doing. I'm just like trying stuff, you know? So, you know, I mean, we get to a point where like it can be really tough, both as the student and as the coach, to evaluate like, okay, is this just working slowly or is it not working, right? And
also, it doesn't help that there's a lot more chances for progress checks in music, where it's like,
oh yeah,
it's like, every time you get a measure right, it's a progress check. Whereas like League, it's like the only thing you really have is like your own, like, hey, am I kind of like laning properly? Am I doing these things properly for like what the coach says? Or like
deploy.
And if like you're winning, like if you're winning a lot, you think you're doing it right, even if you're not. And it's like it's super hard to actually figure out what is and what isn't.
Yeah, the feedback on whether or not you're doing the right thing is totally unclear.
The difference with music is that music, it's your own performance, and it's only what you do that matters. So when you do something wrong, when something sounds wrong,
no variance.
You did something wrong.
There's no teammates. There's no like unclear feedback. It's all very, very, very nice, and I'll go out and say it. I think it's easy to learn. I think that music is a field that is at the current moment in history an easy field to learn, as compared to League of Legends.
It's definitely easy to learn, hard to master type of thing. I think a lot of things are, for sure. Yeah. Where it's like it has a very low barrier of entry, which is cool. And everybody likes playing music or listening to music or something, so it's like it's got a very wide appeal too. But then like getting past a certain level just becomes really hard because it stops being about like making wide sweeping, but it's like almost like one of the things about grad school is like for me it was all about like, oh, you should staccato this note for slightly longer than this note because of this sort of thing. And it's like that's like really small,
sure,
but makes a big difference in the way it's received, and those are the adjustments that I really struggle with so far. So
yeah, I mean,
you know what the
like
funny thing
stuff, right?
is? Yeah, exactly. But the funny thing about that aspect of music is that only musicians will actually hear the fucking difference. And there's a genre, a kind of music that's only
that. Actually, only musicians will be able to point out what the difference is. But I actually think that laymen's have like a sense for at least a preference, right? For what they like and don't like. And I think if you give them like a world-class musician and like a local-class musician, you put them side by side and have them play the same piece, I think that most people would be able to point out the one who is playing it better, even if they may not be able to tell you exactly how or why.
That's fair. That's fair.
It also depends too, because better for different people is different, right? For like me,
100%.
Like I like for Baroque music, I pretty much only like period performances. Music that they try to make sound like the way they would think that Baroque music would have sounded back then. And then there's a school of people who are like, no, let's play it like it's a romantic piece. And it's like, for me, it's like, if a world-class musician plays it as a romantic piece, whereas a local class musician plays it as a Baroque piece, I'm going to go with the local class musician, regardless of like the technical differences, right? For me, it's like, so like there's that sort of thing there too.
Sure,
I think.
Of course.
Yeah.
People have their preferences. It's like
What I was driving at was that there's a kind of a genre of music that's I've discovered that through like personal experience that you can like that I've only seen musicians appreciate. It's the music that relies on some complicated rhythm patterns, like stuff. Yeah, like for example, math rock. Like talk about math rock to a non-musician, and they'll be like, I don't know, man. Seems weird.
It's funny because like I'm pretty. I don't know how to classify like my involvement in music, but I really like math rock a lot. And
you compose music, right? Or you remix music?
Yeah, I do a lot of music, but I do it basically all by ear, right? Like I have some classical training. I took piano for a large number of years, but I'm very much not active with that anymore, and I never did really learn to read music or get deep into theory at all. But I've spent my entire life around music technology, and I've spent my entire life doing like music production stuff, right? Like working at FL Studio, setting up signal chains, doing audio processing, like that kind of stuff is like very much second nature to me at this point. So to even though I may not actually possess the like technical skill to appreciate the theory behind math rock, I find it extremely refreshing as a like break from more well trodden like musical features, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think
agree.
that I have the same kind of an understanding as like somebody who is deep into theory and who might be
Yeah,
able
no,
to
I don't
they
think that you
experience
have
it on
to-
an emotional and an intellectual level, and they're just like losing their mind over it. They're like, "This is the most amazing thing ever." I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
this is
like
pretty
when I was
awesome.
when they were,
You know?
and I'm like, oh my god, that modulation from oh my god, and then you're just like, oh, that was nice.
Nice, I like it.
Oh, did you hear how he took
It
the
makes me
secondary
feel
dominant? Yeah, I piss my friends off all the time, but I try not to do that. But
Yeah, it's good stuff though.
Yeah, because if they don't understand it, they feel stupid.
yeah, exactly. And I don't like making people feel that way.
Yeah.
Well, I know probably no one does. Well,
Geez, people who feel threatened by others' successes. How dare they be that way? We should educate them.
I mean, I'll be honest. I felt a bit threatened by your TFT for a little while, and then you helped me, so I'm good now. It was actually
enough.
really frustrating that I couldn't book any wins, and you're just like, here, look at all these wins, dude. You have like
Look at
90
all
wins
of
in
my
there.
wins! And I'm just like posting like 3 of them every day, and you're just like, fuck you, asshole. How dare you do that to me? Yeah, I get it.
It wasn't like I was like mad or anything, like you were good or anything. It was just like
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
just like frustrating that I couldn't do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like
I
I'm
think-
still having troubles getting wins, but like I'm actually playing more solidly now, so it's like I'm not that upset anymore.
Great. So, meanwhile, I'm over here. I'm feeling like I'm playing like worse and worse every day, but I'm like still having like roughly the same success, and I'm like, what's going on? I don't understand that.
well,
at all.
you're seeing more stuff.
Yeah, something like that. Anyhow, did anyone else have any points in the introduction that they wanted to go over that I did not touch on?
I always make sure if I can remember. I think you got everything I would have gotten too. Yeah, no, I think I'm good.
Dilgo?
Same
Okay.
as fuck.
So, moving on to chapter 1. The authors open up with the anecdote of working with Steve Falloon on the memory game, right?
Yeah.
The basic idea being that Steve tries to remember random strings of digits that are read to him at a pace of like 1 digit per second. That is, slow enough that it's like clear and he's got like a little bit of time, but not so fast, so slow that he can put it into long-term memory immediately, right?
Yep.
And the reason that they decided to do this, it was a study. They got inspired by the work of Martin and Fernberger, who reported that within 4 months of practice, a couple of undergraduates had broken the limits of short-term memory. People said traditional science up to that point had said that there's like a general limit to the number of items that can be stored in working memory, about 7-ish.
Yep.
The length of a local phone number, but definitely not a social security number, right? And then Anders Ericsson was, reading all sorts of different stuff and came across this Martin and Fernberger report that people had gotten up to 13 and 15 items in working memory doing this this test with the random strings of digits. And he was like, we should do something about that. Let's see if we can confirm that. So they got a relatively average Carnegie Mellon undergraduate, long distance runner, Steve Falloon, to do the same thing, and they did some pretty incredible
Lo and
stuff.
behold, yeah.
So
Funny thing is, I read they at some point in the book they talk about Joshua Foer and his book Moonwalking with Einstein, which is him. He was a journalist that he like became interested in mnemonics competitions, and so he became actually one of the top words mnemonists during his research, and he actually went to Ericsson Pool during his his attempts. So they talk about it, and I was like, that's so fucking funny.
yeah, right. No, he was the guy that like mailed them and was like, "Hey, I applied your techniques, and now I'm like world class." And they're like, "Nice, dude, get him." It's like pretty cool. Yeah. So, to quote the text directly, they say, "Then on Friday, something happened that would change everything. Steve found a way to break through. The training sessions went like this. I would start with a random 5-digit string, and if Steve got it right, which he always did, I would go on to 6 digits. If he got that right, we'd go on to 7, and so on, increasing the length of the string by 1 each time he got it right. If, however, he got it wrong, I would drop the length of the string by 2 and go again. In this way, Steve was constantly challenged, but not too much. He was given strings right on the boundary between what he could do and what he couldn't do." So later on in the coming months, using this and several other techniques, they were able to have Steve break his record, and eventually he got up to 82-digit strings of random numbers, blowing the world record before then out of the water by like a lot, right? So I think there are a couple of different things that are really interesting here. Number one, I would say, is that this idea of like making sure that games are right on the boundary of like what you can and can't do, I think actually is like literally precisely what League of Legends matchmaking is designed to do. Isn't that kind of interesting?
Yeah.
It's like
it makes sense because of the way the neuroplasticity works, where it's like, and Jared Tendler talks about like, hey, if things are harder, it's worth more in your brain, right? And it's like if things are easier, they're just not worth as much. So like, like if you can memorize 23 digits, that doesn't make sense for you to keep trying to memorize 5, right? Just like why? It's not going to get you anywhere. I don't know that if this is the book that mentioned it. But like the idea of him, the way he chunked the numbers down, like I don't remember if I got it from this book, to like the sprinting number, the swimming numbers or whatever, because that's what he knew really well.
Yes.
So like every 4 numbers was a group of numbers, and so like instead of having 7 numbers in his short-term memory, he could group 5 or 6 races together, so that he could have
and then he would have a memorization group at the end where he would just repeat it over and over and over and over until he could remember it by the sound of it. And it was that whole idea of like chunking and then remembering the chunks instead of remembering the full thing, and then using hacks, using tricks to put things into long-term memory that otherwise would not be able to go there.
And this experiment actually spawned the I think the World Memory Championships, where now people are memorizing several sets of decks of 52 cards within like a minute and a half. So like, and like visual mnemonics and all the other stuff kind of spawned through this sort of thing. And so now you're having people who like remember things just like that, like just like within a minute. And so it's really interesting to see how far people can take, things that are at one point so revolutionary that people are like, holy shit.
Well, the memory championships have been going on for a really long time. Like they're absolutely not a new thing. But they have seen breakthroughs, like Joshua Foer became America's
that's true.
Best boy. He became #1 best boy through his training. The book is absolutely great. I recommend it. It's called Moonwalking with Einstein.
Yeah, I've read that because Oh, I've reread that because you recommended it to me, and I did really pick up quite a bit out of it. So it's a good suggestion.
Good.
So, the second point that I wanted to make about this specific section is that this game, this like memory game, hardcore reminds me of trying to build map awareness, right?
Yeah.
Like keeping a bunch of
Absolutely.
champion positions in mind at once and then being able to recall them like later in the situations that you need to have them. It's quite literally like a memory challenge as opposed to a decision-making challenge, and that's like very different than a lot of the other difficulty things in League. So I'm starting to wonder if it isn't just that like it's not something that can be made unconsciously competent. It might just be that it looks so different than all the rest of the stuff that like the traditional methods of trying to work with it are not actually targeting the right thing, right?
What do you mean?
I mean, so when we look at like map awareness as a skill, right?
Well, let me try to rephrase to see if I'm getting your point.
Sure.
I think I understand it and I agree. So what he means is that you don't actually get like the way you get better at map awareness is not through drilling yourself, but well, it's not first through drilling yourself. You have to first learn how to group informations in chunks, like in smaller, in groups that make sense on their own, and that when you see one bit, you kind of put it in a chunk. And so you get better by becoming that much better at making chunks.
So, like, for example,
you make bigger chunks each time. Like,
So, like, for
you
example-
learn how to memorize more numbers at once. Like we make chunks of 5 numbers, and then 5.
It's kind of like that, but so I mean, one example of that I think that is really true, right, is like if you have 4 people in a location and there's like 3 people MIA from the enemy team and no one around you, you don't have to be scared. The worst that it can possibly be is like a 3v4, right, that's in your favor. So like, you don't need to at that point ever, you don't even need to make the decision about like, where is everyone and how much can I do it. You can short circuit that entire calculation, right? But I think really what I was sort of trying to drive at was the idea that like most skills in League are one of 2 things. They're either something that is physically difficult to do, as in it's like, the mechanical challenges, the timing stuff for the most part, timing, mouse movement, button clicks, right? Then the vast majority of the game is decision-making focused, right? It's about understanding, given these inputs, what should I then decide to do, right? Information comes in, decision comes out. But with map awareness, a lot of the time, especially when we're talking about like tracking champions through fog, right? It's maybe less about timing and decision making, although I think those things are involved. It's more about memory, and there aren't a whole lot of things that ask you to use your short-term memory efficiently in this game, right? Like, I think map awareness is like actually like the only skill that really like focuses on that particular subset of human skill.
Summoners,
No.
cool spells, cooldown tracking.
Not summoners cooldown, because that's not short-term memory. That's like 3 and more than 3 minutes or.
Well,
most of
but
the time,
that's kind of what I'm saying. Is it is short.
But but there's the just the cooldowns, like the basic cooldown use is short-term memory, like in a fight.
Sure. Yeah,
That's
in
one of
fight
them.
cooldown tracking, I'll give you, is definitely like short-term memory. But I would say tracking longer summoners is a lot of the time it's building the habit
definitely.
of putting it down in chat and then having a queue to go back and look and see like what's going on and like you're trying to put it into longish term memory, right? But I'll give it to you though. That's pretty similar. And I think it's no coincidence that both map awareness and summoner tracking are things that are like notoriously difficult to learn for League of Legends players. I think that we probably haven't figured out the optimal way to train those things, because I think they're actually asking us to do different activities than most of the rest of the game is, right? And that may be why we haven't had a huge amount of success training it yet, right? I think the whole idea of like that there's certain information that you need to collect to make certain decisions, right? And like we kind of lump that in with map awareness, and like that's definitely just like regular old decision making stuff, right? It's all just regular old like cue behavior reward, right? But when you look at things like tracking people through fog, it's not really like there's a moment that can trigger you to go back in time and remember where people were. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a thing. It's just like whenever you happen to have a free moment and in your downtime, there's certain pieces of information that you have to go collect because you'll need them for some decisions in the future, and this now is the time that you can collect the information. And then you actually have to store that in your long-term memory, right? And
so perhaps the problem isn't necessarily with the information tracking, but the method we use to help them encode it.
Exactly. That's kind of exactly what I'm trying to say. Is that like learning? So I think you're right, Dilga. It's basically like learning to chunk, like map state information more effectively. I think is probably like the single biggest thing that's going to actually help with map awareness. And I don't think anyone in the League community, at least that I'm aware of, has really approached it that way before. So
you've got my gears turning, though. I'm gonna think about it.
I'm gonna think about it.
No, that's how I've been seeing it with my recent attempts to improve at it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
because like, what if instead of just looking at the map, there's like 3 sets of information that you want to gather, like say top location, mid location, jungle location, whatever. And then you have like in your mind just like you set up 6 letters that are like jungle's top, whatever, like and then you can kind of come up with this little abbreviation system, and you have like this little set of, it's almost like the
no, I don't think that's well.
It's almost like the algebraic notation for chessboards, where they are like, you can actually just see a whole chess match written down through little letters, and that's how chess players memorize locations and board positions.
I think
through that notational thing. And it's like
I use like a set of landmarks, actually. You know what I mean? It's like when when I'm thinking like where was jungle last seen, right? I'm not thinking like an XY coordinate or something. I'm thinking what jungle camp were they last seen at?
Well, that's part of it, right?
Last seen at, right?
Well, that's part of what I mean. Is like it's not necessarily like queen to e4 or whatever. It's more like jungle, Krugs, Raptors, red, right? So it's like you kind of have like that little path written in your head. Obviously, it'd be the other way around.
Jungle 12 CS.
You know what I mean?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, the way
jungle 12 CS top lane with red, right? Is like that's like a distinct thing, right? And if I can remember that jungle 12 CS top lane red, then I'm like, oh yeah, that means that he either did Raptors red Krugs, red Raptors Krugs, or something similar, because he didn't have his blue. He showed up with 12 CS at level 3, right? Like, there's only a couple of different ways that can happen. And once I see that, it's several different things. It means that I know that he's going to recall and go to his bottom side. It means I know that his top side is going to respawn at a certain amount of time. It means that I know that if he does recall, he's going to have access to only a certain number of items, right? There's like a lot of different implications of that one simple observation. But if one doesn't actually have the mental models to like really deeply understand like what jungle level 3 top red buff 12 CS means, then they'll see jungle top and they'll be like, all right, jungle top, I'm a mid laner. He might just come down river to meet me in mid.
Yeah, I think
You know what I mean?
map awareness is more about being able to predict next movement and seeing where people are at in a set specific moment. Like that's what matters when you don't care about where people are. You care what they are going to be in their next move.
I think you're right.
And that's what the encoding helps you do, because
yes, exactly.
You see a certain map state, and then you know that there's 4 options or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It allows you to see to understand the possibilities in a really fast way. The way I try to explain it is that I'm seeing like lines of I'm just saying lines of power. You know, like they're possible. It's the realm of possibility of all the paths they could be taking, and so I'm just building my that's for seeing through fog. You know, when I know where they were and where they are likely to go, even what they want to do.
But it's also important, I think, to know like what are the probabilities of each. I don't know if you can encode that in there as well, but like
there's definitely that, and
but that's definitely a big difference from what I do, because as somebody who doesn't really understand jungle in that same way, I see a jungler top lane and I know that he's not going to be bot for about a minute, and that's pretty much all I care about.
Yeah, but that's your chunk of information. Jungle top, not bot side for the next minute, and that's where you are at in terms of chunking the information.
Because I don't, as an AD carry, especially with like a support who can help me, like I don't know if I need to really understand. He has 12 CS exactly, right? Yeah. So like different roles also need different encoding. So like for me, like
yeah, well,
I need to
everyone can encode the entire game, you know. Like that's
you could even say, right, like, you know, oh yeah, like jungle top, that means push and base because I want the wave to reset and to not be gankable when he's down here in a minute. You know what I mean? Like you could map it even further, right? Like you don't just have to say like jungle's down here in a minute. You can say jungle's down here in a minute. Let's go even a step further. What does that mean for me from my current lane state, right? What should my option be, given that there's you know, I'm essentially assuming that he'll take an option. I'm assuming he'll take the worst option for me. How do I play around it, right?
And that's something I haven't really thought about, is how do I encode more information to the same thing. With music, I did that a lot. With theory and stuff, I'd come up with several different ways to explain it, and eventually it just kind of came into this really nice mental model where I can explain pretty much any concept really easily, but like I never really thought to do that with League. And, you know, now think about it, it's like the value of what I did in music was so high with that sort of rejiggering my mental models constantly. But it's like maybe it's time to start thinking about doing that for my League games too.
And when you talk about like rejiggering your mental models, not only does that A, make me moist, but B, it also really reminds me of the experience that I've had learning TFT, right? I'll make a mental model, it'll get proved wrong, and I'll be like, all right, all models are wrong, some are useful, this one's ceased to be useful, and I like come up with some new thing, right? It's like, you know, here's my mental model for demons. They're bad. Then I win a game with like Demon 6, Shapeshifter 3, and nothing else, and I'm like, demons are all right? Question mark. Like, I don't know, like my mental model has shifted around that, and like my idea of like, you know, developing pathways through kind of the game in terms of like what synergies do you go for on what particular
one thing I've
numbers
noticed,
of units, and like how do you get from one to another, and what are the positions and all that kind of different stuff. It's like it's constantly changing all the time, and that's, I think,
one thing I've noticed is that like my mental models for TFT are based off what I can do now, whereas yours are like, hey, what can I do in, you know, however many rounds? And it's like that makes a pretty big difference as far as like I struggle with the whole planning ahead thing. So like for me, improvising with what I can do now is my strong point.
And that's, so I think, like, why your positioning is so fantastically good, right? Like my positioning is like way worse than yours, like not close worse than yours, but my compositions tend to be a lot better. So.
Right, because like I'm not thinking of like, hey. And I started being able to do that a little bit, where I'm like, I'm going to commit to this comp by, like, stage 3, and then just, like, whenever I reroll, I'm going to try to get comp champ from that. But, like, my strength comes from being able to adapt to what I see, I think, better than planning ahead, so.
But yeah. TFT's fun to learn.
Like, yeah. So, and I find that's true for me in League, too, even, like, never am I able to, like, really be like, in a minute, I want to, like, push, like, I'm going to push this wave so that in 45 seconds I can be at Baron. and then when they go to the way, right? Like, I don't really do stuff like that very well, but like, I see 4 people topside, I'm like, I'm just going to push in his bot side until they leave. And it's like, I'm a lot better at doing that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one thing for me to think about is definitely going to be encoding and learning, how to encode these things better.
Indeed. I think that's kind of the takeaway I wanted to have, too. So, so then the next piece that I wanted to talk about was the idea of world records, right? He has this little kind of subsection on it, right? He talks about diving, he talks about a marathon, right? And I think the sum total of it is basically that like world records are broken all the time, usually by people who practiced more or more effectively than their predecessors, right? I think he did like 100-year gap or something and showed like 33% decrease in marathon times. There was like a dive that was considered so dangerous that it was banned from the Olympics is now an entry-level dive in that sport, and it's like, I think that's part of why I really, really enjoy the "no one's ever done that before" meme that has been spawned. It's just like, it's an attempt at reminding people that nothing's ever been done before until it has. You know what I mean? Like, no
one's ever done that until everyone has.
Yeah, until someone does, right? And then once they've done it, then now you can do it too, I guess. And people start trying to figure out how to do it. But it's like, I don't know. There was like a course that I took in college actually on like creativity in the workplace, I think, and like creativity in general. And one of the things that they said that I think is really powerful, or one of the takeaways that I had from that course that was really powerful, was the idea that innovation is best achieved by people who already have like good knowledge of the space and the field that they're working in, right? You don't see a lot of people that innovate because they don't know what there is. You see a lot of people who innovate because they know everything, and then they try breaking the rules more systematically, right? And pushing on edges and boundaries that have been established, right? And that they're aware of, right? It's very rare actually that you find the guy who just walks into a field and totally reimagines it from the ground up. It's just kind of a myth. Like, it happens sometimes, but it's very, very rare. Whereas far more often innovation actually happens from people who are working at their craft and hone themselves to very close to the edge of the field, and then get bored and start experimenting and do stuff. So
right, there's something to be said about a lot of people who try to innovate and do really weird stuff, and it just like never works out, and that's because they don't have the fundamental levels.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you wouldn't even be able to you literally can't test because your fundamentals are so bad that you can't even right, put like, onto paper what it is that you want to do, right? Like, if we're talking as
on top of that, right? Like, even if you tried, the people around you are going to be a lot better than you. You're going to lose even because you're so much worse. You're just going to lose even if it is better, right? So you just can't know.
Yeah. It's like you almost can't innovate if you don't have the technical skill to back it up.
That reminds me the Blue Ezreal build that used to be super popular and still is.
Sure.
Was actually the first guy who came up with it was some random gold player, and he suggested it to a pro who laughed at him, and then like eventually some Korean guy tried it and was like, holy shit, this is actually fucking busted.
Yeah. And it's like...
And it just goes to show you that, like, like even gold players can innovate sometimes, but people are going to laugh at them because they're not fundamentally sound enough for it to really be something that you can judge until somebody who is fundamentally sound tries it.
And really another thing that I think is interesting about creativity and innovation is that the class framed it as a process, actually. And it's a process that involves the like field or the community at large, right? It's not actual creativity or innovation unless it is recognized as such, right? And kind of accepted into the like canon of what it means to succeed in a field, right? I mean, it's like if you have like Picasso during his life making crazy paintings in his attic and getting no money for them, is he creative and innovative, or is he just like a dude in an attic, right? You know, and they argue that although it sounds kind of weird to say it out loud, Picasso became creative after his death, once people kind of recognized his work and started to appreciate it, right? And it's like, you know, the Ezreal player who came up with Blue Ezreal, who was in gold, wasn't innovative. He became recognized as innovative once somebody else realized his vision for a build that he was not able to pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether you want to call it the person who actually popularized it or the person who came up with it, you know, they both had a hand in the process. There is no single person who is creative. It's not a quality of a person. It is a process that happens among multiple people, and it's the interplay between, you know, an innovator in a field and a body of work, right? So, you know, neither of them are fully responsible for the innovation and the creativity, and in fact, all of us who now know of it are somewhat responsible for the innovation and the creativity, because we're people who play it. We're people who maintain the field that the innovation exists in. If there was no field, if League of Legends didn't exist, no one would care about Blue Ezreal, right? So,
Right.
You know, it's something that's participated in by like everyone, and it's not something that you necessarily have to pin onto a specific group or a specific person. It's not a quality; it's a process.
Indeed.
I thought that was really interesting.
That's a pretty key insight, I think, is that, like, because a lot of us feel like, you know, we have to stand out, but like the reality is that most of us don't stand out until after we're done, right? So it's like, you know, maybe it's not about figuring out how to stand out, but rather figuring out, you know, how do I make everything so efficient that everybody has to adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about like making the world different. It's about doing your best.
Sure, I can get behind that.
Which is really weird to say, but like, I mean, it makes sense when you think about it that way.
Right? Yeah.
Because how often do people who are aiming to make the world different, how often do they actually do it? If there's people who are just like sitting in their basement composing music for 8 hours a day that actually made the biggest differences.
It's the people who get out there and get after it. It is the people that hone their craft. It is the people who do the work and get the technical skills that end up actually making the change. It is a byproduct of pursuit of mastery, not a pursuit in itself. You don't set out to change the world, you set out to get good, and in the process of getting good, innovation is a tool that you either use or don't, depending on the situation. But in order for innovation to be successful, most of the time, you must already possess a very high degree of technical skill. So, as a learner, as someone who isn't at the top of the ladder yet, don't go trying to make fancy builds. You just don't know enough to be able to even get anything useful out of it. Even if you did discover something, you wouldn't know whether it was good or not, because you're just going to get beaten by people with better fundamentals.
You don't have hands.
You don't have hands. So, you know, it's like you have no metric by which to judge your novelties, right? And they're just novelties until somebody with hands picks them up and makes them innovations.
And so you have to be the one with hands in the first place.
Yep, if you want to take credit for it. So that's kind of a tangent off of the idea of like world records. And then
one hell of a tangent.
Yeah, no joke. And then kind of the next thing here is the idea of practice, right? Practice being something that is common and that looks common between a lot of different fields, precisely because the one constant among expert performers is their decidedly human brain. You know, we're all people here, so people learning to do a thing looks the same because we're all people learning, right? Regardless of what the thing actually is. Although there will obviously be differences in the content and differences in the process. The overall shape of it looks quite a lot the same. So there's, in this particular chapter, he talks about two different types of practice. He talks about the usual approach being naive practice, and a better approach being purposeful practice. And later on in the book, he talks about deliberate practice being even a further extension on top of purposeful practice. So when he talks about the usual approach, naive practice, to use the adult learning model, the idea of, any skill being able to be put into 4 categories: unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. A lot of people will essentially take all of the easy stuff that they know about and practice it to unconscious competence, the point where it's on autopilot. You get to a point where you aren't embarrassingly terrible anymore. You have a decent idea of some of the fundamentals that are going on. And, maybe you get to a point where you're maybe a mid to a high blue belt, right? If we're talking in Matt Thornton's sort of stuff. But at some point you start having clear weaknesses that you can recognize, but because the situations that exercise those weaknesses don't happen every single match or every single rep, you don't get to really practice them all that often, and your encounters with them are sporadic and infrequent. There's also kind of, the myth that if you just kind of keep doing it, when you have a skill at unconscious competence, that it will somehow magically change. It will not. Once you have gotten something to unconscious competence and you continue to do it, no changes are being made at that point. You are just using your automated skill. It is no learning is taking place. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they continue to just kind of do the thing and hope it'll change. And they just kind of keep putting in reps and expect that repetition alone will actually improve their performance.
I feel personally attacked right now.
a little bit attacked, just a tiny bit attacked.
I feel personally attacked.
Yeah. So the alternative that he mentions is purposeful practice. It's different than naive practice in a lot of different ways. And to summarize it, he has a really fantastic sentence. Here we have purposeful practice in a nutshell. Get outside your comfort zone, but do it in a focused way with clear goals, a plan for reaching those goals, and a way to monitor your progress. Oh, and also, by the way, XD, figure out a way to maintain your motivation. Just do that, That's not a thing that's hard. Just manage that.
Always put yourself in some place that's painful and just keep doing it all the time.
Yeah, just keep doing it all the time and enjoy it too.
It's easy as
it's
fuck.
Good. Just keep doing it. Yeah, it's fine. XD. So obviously, Jared Tendler takes that last point to a much more useful extreme, but most of the rest of it is, I think, kind of new sort of stuff, right? So, for one thing, right, you have to get outside of your comfort zone, right? You want to be right on the edge of what's challenging and what's achievable, right? And you need to be trying to do things that you cannot currently do, right? If you are trying to do something that you can currently do, then, maybe you're training a skill from conscious competence to unconscious competence. But at that point, you are just solidifying what you know, right? You're not improving what you know. So if you actually want to see a difference in, let's say, your A game, right? It's not enough to, your A game isn't going to be any different for moving something from conscious competence into unconscious competence. It's not going to change, right? If you want to improve your A game, you need to actually learn new skills. And to do that, you need to do deliberate practice. You need to be focused, right? It requires your full attention. And on top of that, it should be, there's a specific thing that you should be focusing on. It's not just I'm going to get out there and get better at stuff, right? That's not going to work too well, right? You want to have a very specific plan for action, and you want to be focusing on a specific skill that you wish to improve in a specific way. On that line of reasoning, you need to have well-defined specific goals, right?
Yep.
Goals are very important because they allow a student to judge if a practice session has been a success or not, right? If you have goals and you have metrics for whether or not you've achieved those goals, then that actually is what allows you to tell whether or not your practice is working. I mean, there's that whole quote that's in there of the, piano student that's like, I don't know, I mean, I just like played it a bunch of times and it didn't get any better. The freaking music teachers over there that fucking corner face palming really hard. Like, yeah, it's you need to be able to, in order for deliberate practice to work, in order for you to learn new skills, you need to be able to recognize your mistakes, and you need to have some idea of what correction needs to be applied in order to fix the mistakes, right? If you're just kind of blindly flailing around, it isn't going to do much, right? And in terms of how do you develop a plan for achieving some kind of a goal, you take a general goal and you break it down into a series of steps, and you keep breaking those down until you have something specific that you can actually work on with a realistic expectation of improvement, right? So, if we take get good at League of Legends as a goal, right? Well, there's a lot of different skills in League of Legends. Let's pick one. Map awareness. Okay, map awareness is bad. Let's pick CSing. It's easier. Okay, all right, here we go. So let's take CSing, right? Your CS is bad, right? Well, how do you improve your CS? Well, there's the timing of it. There's understanding how the different minion waves are going to interact with each other and focus each other, understanding the specialized rule of the first wave, understanding layering as an idea, understanding how harassment and trading and laning in general fits into the pattern of CSing. There's a ton of different things. Okay, maybe the reason that I'm losing all of my CS is because I'm trading and getting crapped on in my trades. Okay, well, now we need to work on trading. Well, maybe the reason that you're getting dicked on in trades is because you don't use trading stance, right? Okay, so now specifically, you're going to go into a game and you're going to look at the enemy's minion wave and you're going to look at your minion wave. You're going to focus on dodging when he has no minions and you have a minion you need to last hit. And you're going to focus on harassing when you have no minion to last hit and he has a minion to last hit, right? And you can literally go through and you can identify every single time that happened during a laning phase, and you can judge yourself based on whether or not you were able to successfully recognize and then execute on the intended behavior at that particular moment, right? And that process of understanding what the different skills break down into and being able to actually formulate some kind of a plan for how to improve at a skill is hard. Who would have thunk that is a difficult thing, right? Most people hire coaches for this, right? And that's kind of what gets you into deliberate practice instead of purposeful practice. But in purposeful practice, you're just kind of doing it yourself. You're like, all right,
You're figuring it out on your own.
You're figuring it out, and that's how you figure it out.
The only difference I picked up between deliberate and purposeful is that, goddamn, so many stop fucking honking your horns, goddamn fucking parachute, goddamn it, I would fucking...
I completely agree with you. That is the difference that I come up to.
Yeah.
Goddamn 14th of July. Fucking national...
Is that Paris International Day?
Not Paris International Day, it's just, wait.
Baguette International Day?
Wait, what are we fucking celebrating on the 14th of July? I'm not even sure. Holy shit.
France.
No,
Somebody just kicked a ball into a goal somewhere.
Oh my god.
It's called Bastille Day.
No. Oh my god, it's the fucking... Oh my god, it's the fucking commemoration for the fucking start of the French Republic. God damn it, I'm fucking proud.
Nice.
That's funny.
XD. Yeah, so it's literally like Independence Day. Got it. Understood.
It's the most important day of the entire year of a French national dude. French national dude. That makes no sense. I'll just go lead with that.
Understood. So, I think this is a tremendously important point, so we're going to dwell on it a bit.
So the difference
I don't
I
even
was
remember what the
actually
point
saying
is
is that
anymore.
The point is purposeful practice versus naive practice.
Oh yeah. Oh, you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, so you mentioned that when we described naive practice that you felt like personally called out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what are some things that you feel like you've been naively practicing, and let's try and work through like what are some different ways that you can add some purpose to your practice for those things?
Well, like, I don't really have a metric very well set up for hey, this is how many times that I got screwed when I tried to go trading stance, and this is the reason why. It was kind of like I go through each game, and like everything is for a different reason. It's like, so it's like for me, it's like I'll go one game and I'll be like, this game I'm going to practice a blah 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 thing, but then ya thing messes up. So the next game I'm like, well, I can't practice blah 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 thing until I get ya thing, so I practice that. And then it kind of goes into the circle where I'm like practicing a different thing every game,
Yeah.
which slows me down to the point where it's like I'm getting. It's almost like you know how in
You're just
Pokemon
kinda
games where if you give all your
to kind of pin the tail on the donkey here, you're kind of following your interests around. Ooh, yikes! How ADHD of you?
hey man, right? But it's
Oof, ouch.
but it's also I'm not sure if it's so much like my. I mean, it's obviously part of it, right? Because it's like,
Sure, yeah. No.
because it's like, hey, yeah, it's more interesting to work on the thing that I need to work on now, right? But like, I also don't feel like I have a good idea of like how to take metrics. So like music, it's very simple. If I play it right, I play it right, right? It's like I know what a piece of music should feel like and look like when it's played well. I can take my recordings and like go listen to somebody else, and it's very similar. But like, I can't take a pro player who's in that very same situation and watch them because same situations don't occur in the Challenger they occurred Platinum,
Yeah,
right?
you're never
So it's
playing the same piece of music twice in League of Legends. It's a different piece every game. The situation
and so like
is
the
changed.
feedback, I don't know where to get it. I don't know what the feedback is, and I think that's my problem.
Mm-hmm. And I think now that you have identified that problem, you can begin to attack it. Whereas if you don't have this information and you don't think about it in this way, then, you just think you're talentless. Geez, I keep working on all of these different things and they don't make any sense and nothing changes. GG, right? But if you instead start saying, okay, so here are some skills that I'm struggling with. What are some metrics that I can come up with? What do I actually think my play should look like, right? And that's all very deliberate, slow thinking kind of stuff, which, we're aware that you tend to struggle with. So,
I'm getting better at it now that I'm like actually working through my mental models of like strategic thinking and tactical thinking. It's forced me to spend a lot of time slow thinking, and it's starting to come easier to me. So it's like it's a skill that I'm working on now.
Great, that sounds really good.
It's pretty good.
So, take like two or three things that in specific that you're struggling with right now, and let's try to.
Well, let's go with the two things that I found last night. My bad habit of me clicking backward after every single time I auto attack.
Sure.
And like sometimes it's a good idea too, sometimes it's not. But when I'm even or behind, that's my default habit. Whereas like if I'm ahead, I don't do that. I just clamp down and like. So like what happens is like I'll get ahead and then like I end up having 8 kills because I just clamp down on them. I'm not losing my pressure from clicking backward because I know I'm stronger. But if I don't feel like I'm stronger, then...
So I think the question then becomes, so it seems like the metric, or not the metric, but it seems like the goal is, if you will win an all-in from that position, or you'll win like an extended trade from that position, if going for a second auto attack puts you in a situation that's good, then you want to keep clicking. I mean, it starts sounding like a tautology at that point. If it's good to click again, you should click again. If it's not good to click again, you should not click again. So, how can you tell whether or not it will be good to click again?
Probably has to do with clicking.
Really?
No.
I don't think it has anything to do with clicking.
Absolutely nothing to do with it.
All right. So I think a couple of factors immediately jump into my mind. What factors jump into your mind? If somebody just comes to the server and they're like, I don't know when I should continue a trade or not, what are the things you're going to ask them about?
So like things like HP levels, range advantages, shit like that, like the actual like in-game factor that I would think about first off. The positioning of me and my support versus them and their support, like the minion waves. And like that's
What
the thing
champion
too.
you're
Is, like,
playing? What
Yeah,
the abilities in your kit do? And
Well,
I think
the
that
thing,
about
like-
covers it, right?
like I know cognitively, like against Caitlyn, I can win auto attack trades. I mean, because that's how Twitch versus Caitlyn works, in the sense that like she can headshot me every 6 hits, but I mean realistically that's all she gets. Where like my E is gonna do more damage than a headshot of her. So like
Sure.
Yeah. And
I know that I win
win
an auto trade. Yet I feel so pressured against Caitlyn because of her extra range. And I found out another habit I have is that like when when the champion's obviously clicking on you because they're running straight at you.
Yes.
Oftentimes I'll just like instead of when I'm hitting a minion, I'll still hit the minion rather than like cancel the minion and then just like auto buffer on Caitlyn so that I can close my range against her, right? Because
Yeah.
like one of the ways you have to beat her is by actually invading her range when she's coming into yours.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
it's
you can never hit her.
you turn a harass into a trade. You choose to retaliate the minion and go for the auto attack trade instead of taking the CS and just taking the free damage, because you
Right.
realize that giving up 1 CS now to keep the possibility of all-hitting her if she walks up past your wave is more important than losing the single CS now. The pressure you give up is more CS later than the one that you give up now.
Right. The thing I'm struggling with is that, like, in my mind, like, I do this with Dravens and all the other shit, but, like, Caitlyn's just some sort of mental block where it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to... It's like she's shoving me in so hard all the time that I feel like I can't do anything, right? So it's like, there's definitely a mental leak in there, but, like, also, what are the metrics I live up for? You know what I mean? It's like...
I wouldn't frame it as a mental leak. Maybe as just a wrong mental model. That if you get shoved in, it means you're weaker. Maybe that could be a thing, right?
Well,
In the case of Caitlyn, you're
mental
pretty
leak,
much
that's
weaker.
too. Right, but like mental leak in the sense that like it's not just a tactical error. Like it's a tactical error that's based upon something that I'm thinking that is incorrect. Rather than regardless of whether it's tilt or confidence or fear or just like a wrong mental model.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I view mental leaks, of just sort of conglomerate of all the things, and so.
Yeah, I think
thank you
the
for
common
bringing it up.
usage of mental leak in the server has kind of come to mean more like emotional leak.
Yeah.
And then in that case, I should come up with a different term that signifies what I mean.
Yeah.
Like a mental bidet,
mental parole, how about
a mental toilet.
mental?
You're the mental toilet.
Yikes.
Yikes. What?
6'10". So I guess the thing for me when I start thinking and looking at that, right, is you start saying stuff like, okay, one of the reasons that Caitlyn is able to shove in so hard is because she spams Q on the wave, right? If she spams Q on the wave, she doesn't have Q to trade with. So when she uses a Q on the wave, that would be the optimal time to go for a trade, except that she usually uses it and now her wave is larger, right?
So yeah,
So before she is able to do that, you need to start counter shoving, right? Because there's like never a situation where a Caitlyn starts to get shoved in and then is like, oh yeah, I'm just going to sit here and zone you, right? Like, I feel like most Caitlyns don't do that, right? Like, even if they technically could. And maybe that's
I
not,
think
like,
that's part of the
greatest
problem
argument.
is that like I know what Caitlyn can do,
Yeah.
and so like I just like give up the wave,
Yeah.
which I shouldn't, because like I noticed that like in high elo like they never give up the wave because like even if Caitlyn can do the thing, doesn't mean she will do the thing.
You put her in the position to make to where she has to make a more difficult decision, something that she's encountered less frequently, that she maybe doesn't have a good mental model for, right?
And then
And
problem
if you
also
put her in a
comes with
position
that,
where
like-
she's uncomfortable, she's like, wait a second, I'm supposed to have wave prio here, and now I don't. What do I do? You know, they
the
can't
issue
handle
also
it.
comes with how my support handles the situation, because like
100%.
I know that I'll be trying to stand on my caster line, and then Lulu will like my last night, like Lulu was standing behind me,
Yeah.
good 200 units. So obviously she's
Yeah,
just gonna
and
counter
then
my
it's
cast
just- there's
like my melee line.
There's nothing you
And
can do at
then-
that point, right? It's just
And then
like-
Lulu just tells me to play aggro, right? And it's like, do you have no idea what you're talking about? Just shut up, okay?
Yeah. No,
And
I
so,
mean,
like,
like,
you know, there's
legitimately
that, and
bad
then, like,
supports
them
that don't know
forehead.
how to play into Caitlyn is like, I mean, that's the thing, right? But then I think here's a metric for you that's important, okay? Look at every Caitlyn lane that you played and every bad trade that you took against Caitlyn and every moment that you got pushed in by Caitlyn, and look at what your support did. Was it that they were positioned well and you took a bad trade? Or was it that they positioned like garbage? Is it you or is it them? You need to know that.
But like either way, even if it is them, and it's not me, it's on me to play with them, right? So it's like,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
if they're positioning back, I can't in all contexts be
Yeah.
trying to contest the wave because
So-
I'm just giving
Yes.
Your
So it's
metric
like-
is, are you and your support on the same page? And maybe
And I
playing
have no
with
idea,
your
it's a big
support.
problem, too. It's like,
Yeah. Maybe playing with your support is the thing that's going the most wrong in the Caitlyn lane, and maybe Caitlyn is a champion that particularly hard punishes you and your support being on different pages. I think that sounds accurate to me. Her range advantage makes it so that if either one of you is a little bit too far forward and the other one can't return trade, she just walks up, gets an auto, and leaves. And you're just like,
Mhm.
well, shit, I guess. You know what I mean? And she does that like
And
6
when
times.
she gets one
now
auto
she's won
and
the
it's a
lane.
headshot,
Yeah.
yeah, like the
It's done. You know, if she tethers a little bit better than you, and you and your support aren't on the same page, lane's done, right? So, I think that's one of the things that you'll see look quite different between your games and the pro games, right? When you look at the
I
pro
did
games,
notice that last night. Yeah, that like
there's the support is always on point. They know where to stand to make sure that Caitlyn cannot auto attack their carry, and if they don't stand there, oh, you bet Caitlyn's auto attacking, and you bet the AD carry is raging. Like, it's happening. Like, so,
yeah, I definitely noticed that with the game I watched of Twitch Lux versus Caitlyn something, and it was like really
the
quite
Lux
different.
is like
to me, 'cause
walking
the
forward.
Lux
She's
back
like,
is like
no, this is the thing that the support will do, right? Lux, you have a CS to get. Lux walks forward at the same moment and is like, auto attack me instead, bitch. And then she like throws out her shield on both of you, and then like you get the CS.
And
Caitlyn
it's
is like,
just-
free.
it's just such a different world where it's like
Uh-huh.
the support, like in that case, like made it possible for Twitch to even think about playing the game. Where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's like I have to try to 1v2 and get good trades off by myself because the enemy, my support's like play aggro while playing under her turret. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
sure, yeah, no, it's definitely me.
Mhm.
But like, so it's like
And
you know, there's
if
that
you
thing,
find
but there's
out
also
that
the
that's
thing
the
that's
thing,
like,
right? If you find out that that's really the reason that you struggle with this lane and it's not actually your mental model, then you can kind of stop worrying about it and you can just say, ban Caitlyn until my supports know what to do with it. You know what I mean? And you don't have to worry about, is that a good decision or am I avoiding the problem or whatever, right? But like, if you don't know for sure whether it's you or your support or something that you should be doing that they're doing that you're not doing, then you can't make that judgment call, right?
right. But then I also noticed that like in both of the lanes that I lost, even though I was behind, I had ample opportunities to free punish because of the fact that they weren't on the same page just as often as we weren't on the same page, right? So it was like
Mm-hmm.
there was times where Caitlyn would come up to my melees to harass me with like Gianna or Nami in her fucking bush.
Mhm.
And instead of going to like, hey, I can just walk up to her, auto buff her, auto her like 4 times, kite to the left, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like, ah, shit, she's harassing me. I'm oh my god, I'm dying, right?
Uh-huh,
So it's
uh-huh.
like, so like,
Yeah.
there's metrics there too, where it's like, I'm not identifying zone advantages properly
Uh-huh. So
as well.
it sounds like, I mean, you could call it a zone advantage when it's when it's a positive, when it's like a thing that you're punishing on them, and you can call it like a playing with your support when it's them doing it to you and you maybe not reacting properly. But either way, it's basically the skill here is your positioning relative to the other 3 people in the lane.
Mm-hmm.
And the metrics are you, like, in all of the situations where you and where damage is exchanged, look at the position of all three of you and ask if where you decided to be made sense. How many of the times do you feel like you did it right? How many of the times do you feel like you did it wrong? You know what I mean? There. Now you have a did I do it right? Did I do it wrong metric, just like in like music.
But then it's like,
Maury, a question. Do you review every game you play or not? Through VODs, like after the game?
I usually only review questionable games.
Okay. Because
So, yes,
I used
every
to
game.
do... Fucking got me. Yeah, got me there. Because I used to review like 1 out of 3 games basically, and Hello There told me to like for a week try to review every game, and what I discovered was that it was actually so fucking painful to do first. It took so much willpower to bring myself to do that fucking boring game review after each one, but it's what allowed me to make faster progress as well, because I was getting my feedback better. Also because when I was in game, I knew I was going to review it, so I would not spend any time dwelling on what was going on, like what had happened at all. So it's like
So for you, it was like a motivator to like play better because you knew that you had to review it.
No,
right.
It got rid of one of my issues that was I was worried about forgetting about my mistakes. So I thought like long and hard about my mistakes while in game, which is a terrible thing to do.
Oh, okay. So since you were seeing every game, you didn't have to spend that mental effort thinking about your mistakes, so you're going to review them anyway.
Yeah, and I was also getting the actual best thing right. Like getting the actual feedback afterwards is also what allowed me to finding
closing
the
that
accurate
feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Making
the
it
one
shorter
thing
and
I will
shorter.
say for me personally is that I've told Atherton this, but like I get this really bad problem with brain bloat. I feel like because I feel like if I review every game, then I have like a billion things that I see wrong.
Yes, and
So it's
that's that's also the other thing is that when I review these games, I don't review them entirely. I have my goals and know what I'm working on, and I'm looking for these specific points in the game. Yes, that's because I was also like doing full reviews, and after one day I told her like fuck no, dude, like no fucking way, I'm dying over there. And he told me just look at what you're interested in right now. So what's your
use your metrics to figure out what are the moments that I need to focus on. If your metric is, how many times when a trade happened was I in the proper position, the only thing you have to look at is your trades. Everything else is meaningless relative to the metric.
Right.
So the metrics are
Which
what
means
allow
instead of
you to
looking
focus
at
your
30
review.
minutes of gameplay after every game, you're looking at maybe 5.
Yeah, basically. And that made it much more efficient and also much easier to do, like less of a less brain.
And that makes it a lot easier to create a effective paper trail too, because that was my problem. Like Jared Tendler talks about paper trail, and I'm like looking at all my pages. There's like 9 pages of notes because I'm taking notes of every little thing that I did wrong. I'm like, and it's like obviously I'm not going to improve at everything because it's like there's a billion things there, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like that makes sense.
Yeah. You pick a thing, and when somebody says pick a thing and focus on it, this is what they actually mean. They mean
focus on it in game and any review.
Yeah, in game and during the review. In game, use your conscious competence to bring that particular skill into your working memory and think about it while you're doing it. And then post game, look at all of the decisions that you made that were relevant to that particular skill, and use the metrics that you've come up with to judge those decisions and come up with modifications to your decision-making process that you actually want to implement. Then use Q behavior response to actually implement those changes to your decision-making that you want to make.
So how do you guys deal then in that case? Because like all this makes sense, and this is things that like I haven't really tried all that much. This is something that's like I know to try, but like can kind of afraid to, because in my experience in the past, and I've told Nathan this too, that's like, well, what do I do in a case where like I'm focused? I have to focus so hard on a thing that everything else goes shitty. So it's like I end up losing anyway, and it's like nothing's improving.
Yes. Well, I'm not sure how that's like directly related to. See, yeah, okay, I mean, so focusing on one thing.
Play
Yeah, so
easier
like if you
games.
focus on
Yeah,
I'm
play
focusing
easier.
on one
That's the thing. Play easier games.
Lower
If
the
the skill
intensity
is a
of the
skill
activity.
that takes if it's a skill that takes a lot of brain power, for let's say actively tracking the enemy jungler, like camp by camp in the early game, that shit makes you completely stupid at the rest of the game while you're learning.
Yep. All of the
And-
rest of your skills that are in conscious competence that you usually see in your B game, out the fucking window. You are playing
Yeah,
your
you're
C
like-
game for this day. Like,
and
Yeah.
that's hard for me. It makes me feel bad, right? So it's
Yeah.
like
but
Mhm.
it's use a lower like a lower pressure account. Doesn't have to be a lower ranked account, because the pressure is only equal to what you put on yourself. Like ranked is not a pressuring thing. It's a pressuring thing because you choose it to be, right?
because we choose it to be.
So
but at the same time, there is also the literal difficulty of the game that you're in, and so like
Yeah.
the rank of the account and the
Obviously-
the MMR that it's going to use to place you in a match with other players
Yeah.
that have a certain number of skills, like that's also important. You want to be in an easier game so that the decisions that you make that are not as polished aren't going to cause you to immediately lose the game, and you still get a good period where you're able to actually do the exercise, and it's like efficient training, right? And
And then,
Matt Thornton talks about this too. It's all about you have to use progressive resistance, right? It's
The
this idea that
transfer
you
of
wanna-
skill, yeah.
So that would be what I would respond to that with.
But then also Jared Tendler, remember, he talks about the idea like practicing a skill at level 5 will get you however many more time, quote unquote, reps than it does at level 2 or level 3. So it's
Yeah,
like
but-
so it's like it may be really fucking hard and everything may go out the window, but like if you're having a really bad day, those are the days that are often the most valuable because they're so much harder.
Yes, but there
Kind of,
also comes
but
a
you-
time
you-
where it's too much.
Exactly.
yeah, you can't go level
exactly.
5 without having gone level 1 before.
Exactly right. So like there's a difference there, but like if your transfer of skill, like for me, it used to be based on my emotional state. So like some days Gage will be just level 5 because I'm so tilted and I'm still trying to play. So like
Yeah.
trying to really like
So
hammer down the
fucking hard.
injecting logic statements, and I've gotten more value out of those days working on my overconfidence skills, overconfidence problems, and basically all my mental leaks were like the biggest progress always came from the really hard days where like I really didn't want to use my injecting logic statements and do mental hand histories after, but I got way more value of that out of them.
Mhm.
So like in situations where you can't control the level of games that you're in, then maybe it makes sense for you to work on them, but otherwise maybe it makes more sense for you to try to avoid those situations,
Mhm.
But
Well, I think like harder games are really, really great. Oh my god, are really, really great when it comes to like getting to the next level of the skill, right? Like finding breakthrough. I can't speak. Yeah, does that make sense? Because you're like hitting a wall and you literally have no choice other than to do it better, right? And
right.
since it's harder, it's also like a memory that's gonna stick more because we remember harder stuff more.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah,
So-
that's a good point. Where like there comes a point where practicing against gold players just doesn't cut it anymore. Even if it's like your metrics are
Yes.
testing against yourself,
Yeah.
like Faker, for example, he would practice, and Faker comes to mind specifically for this because I remember a video, and I'm still trying to find it, that somebody posted on like Reddit somewhere, where he talked about the way he worked on things, and the number one thing I pulled out of it was that he never compared to other people. He always ever compared to himself, right? So like
Yeah.
in retrospect, like the skill of the other players really didn't matter that much, except for helping him find the mistakes he made. Because once he found the mistakes he made, all he had to do was metric himself. Like, for example, to practice Riven jumping, what he would do was time it so that he would always use his third Q over a tower. Then if he couldn't do the third Q on a tower, it didn't matter. He would do it on the next tower. And if he missed it, he would just stay at the tower, even if he was going to lose the game off of it, right?
Yeah.
Or like, he used to use combos on the way to lane. that he could.
So that way he
Uh,
practiced and got the lane harder for himself. Yeah, he literally makes the game harder than it needs to be. That's
Right, exactly.
he makes the game is not interesting. He makes it interesting.
And that's something that I'm really gonna start taking to heart. I think now that because that really kind of tells me that he's injecting purposeful practice, by himself. He's just
Into
playing normal
everything.
games.
Yeah.
So and then
Yeah,
here
for
most
example,
people
like-
are in ranked games, just playing and hoping to get better.
And
Naive practice.
this hardcore reminds me of Matt Thornton and some stuff that I read by him a long time ago that I am now seeing in a very different light, right? And one of the things that he talks about is this really, really core concept called progressive resistance, which is this idea that, like, you do not immediately attempt to apply the movement at, like, full strength. You first do it with almost no resistance, right? So that somebody can see technically, like, are you putting your hands in the right spot? Is the are you pushing at the right time? Like, do you understand the sequence, right? That kind of stuff. And then you do it in and almost all of the practice that he does at his gym isn't full resistance sparring, right? It is drilling at, like, maybe 60% resistance. People are resisting, but they're not using their full strength. They're just using a certain amount of their strength. This, I think, in League applies to playing ranked versus playing normals. And I had never thought of it this way before.
Well, I'm seeing it as playing Smurf versus playing playing on my main, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Totally
What I'm seeing it as increasing your so in music, a lot of the ways we practice to get things right is like, obviously, we don't play things at the full speed unless we're so good at sight reading that we can, right? But if we have placements that trip us up, we take them at 5% speed, right? Like 1%.
Yes, that's what I was about. I wanted to say.
We go so freaking slow that you can't even recognize the piece. There's a guy who teaches a New York conservatory whose philosophy basically is literally, if you're playing it fast enough that people can recognize it, you're playing it too fast. And you always play at that really slow speed, and then, like, at some point your body just knows that it can speed it up right away. So it's like, what if we can practice League mechanics in that way? So it's like, maybe in practice tool
that's practice. That's how I use practice tool, basically. I just do stuff slowly until I'm able to go quickly. And this, I wanted to make the same reflection about music, because that's so I've been playing, like, the bass guitar for like something like 8 years, and so I have played in metal bands, which technical death metal bands. So I've had to move my fingers
that's really
quite
difficult
fast.
music to play.
And so that's one of the things we do. Like, you don't start a piece by playing it at full speed, because that's absolutely insane. That makes no sense. You're gonna fucking fumble over yourself. And I can't remember which book talks about it. I don't know if it's Peak or not, but it's about no, it's not Peak. It's fucking Josh Whiteskin.
The Art of Learning.
Moonwalking.
No.
The Art of
Moonwalking
Learning.
with Einstein. Or the Art of Learning.
That's
Josh
that's Joshua. The other of learning. Thank you. Where he talks about doing things very, very, very slowly in martial arts to build the muscle memory. And he makes the point that the same thing in dancing, that you first do a choreography very, very slowly.
And then it comes to the point where you can do it so well that it's almost like it doesn't even feel like you have to do it anymore.
That's how they committed to unconscious competence, basically.
Yeah. And it's much faster that way.
Very, very, yeah, it is. It's been proven that's so much faster.
So,
Another thing that's interesting too is that, like, you talk about, like, hey, you shouldn't play a piece full speed at the start, and I agree with that to an extent. There's for me, as a piano player who's has so much experience, I can look at a piece of music and know exactly what I can play right away and what I can't. So it's like, you sometimes you get to a level of expertise where you can kind of know what you do need to work on before you even go through it. So, like, I'll grab a piece and be like, okay, this is going to be a part that I can't play through, and then I'll just, like, sight read the piece.
your mental model of your own skill and what will be challenging is well developed.
Right. And so, like, that's the skill that I think is important too, is that, you have to be able to recognize, because, like, the thing is that, like, deliberate practice is great, but if there's parts where you're like, if you're going to play a new piece, then you can already play 80% of it at full speed, and only 10% of it's like super difficult. And then it doesn't seem to make much sense to play the whole piece very slowly, because it's kind of like you could be spending all that time pointed more.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That said, you know when you're at that place. You know what I mean? Anyone who is at that place is fully consciously aware that they don't need to slow it down. You know what I mean? And so, like, if
That's
there's
true.
any doubt in your mind of whether or not to slow it down, slow it down.
You slow it down, exactly.
It's like that.
It's
It's
like
like
that kinda
the
tells
thing
me-
that my teacher in high school said when we would go on camping trips with our class. You know, he said, if you have to ask whether or not it's a shenanigan, it's a shenanigan.
Right. That kind of tells me that my it's just funny how developed my music skills are, you
Yeah.
know, as far as like that goes, because you know, in the past
You'll
I've never
never
really
be
felt
able
like
to
I was
play
a
the
developed
piano.
musician.
You will never be able to play the piano, or that we all know.
Yeah,
You
well,
should stop.
the time
God,
that
you should.
I got second place in a competition made me feel that way for 3 weeks. Felt horrible.
Yeah.
Like,
I had such big expectations that when I lost by a single point, I was pissed for weeks, and it's like that's not cool. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And I'm in a much better mental spot now. It's like I'm starting to go back to making like video game arrangements, and I'm gonna start like learning them. It's gonna be fun.
Oh no.
Finally at a
no.
place where I actually want to play again.
Oh, also, it's not related to Peak, but I've been pondering after our discussion earlier, Atherton. And I think the one thing that I need to do is just fucking take one day of break weekly. Because that I'll do like other stuff, see people,
Yeah.
and that also help prevent burnout.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
Prevent-
fantastic.
Also,
Yeah.
what I've learned to
JT
do,
approved.
Gilga, not to interrupt you, but I've learned that I prefer sessions of 2 to 3 games and then take a 20 to 30 minute break, analyze the games, and then get back into another set. Has really helped me to get rid of my brain bloat, and that like I'm focused on a set of games, and then like over a 20-30 minute period, like after I journal a bit, then there's just like nothing there. I can just go focus on whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
come
yeah.
back, and
used
I
to-
feel
to
refreshed.
do that.
So
Yeah, I still cannot do that, except I do the 2 to 5 minute reviews of each game in between. That's still how I go about it. Like these are my sets. Basically.
So the
Sets of
problem with that is that
Yeah.
like you develop brain bloat, like all the things are in your brain and then like they don't get out. It's like if you ever had situations where like you're done with the day and then you try to go to bed and then just like you're just thinking about League and all the things that you could have done better or whatever. You trying to sleep, you can't.
Yeah.
I've learned that journaling.
I don't have this issue anymore. I'm good at putting it down.
That's
And,
really good. That's a skill that I need to develop. So, but yeah, I mean, I
do the
think
game,
that's
figure out, and then go fucking read a goddamn book before going to bed.
Too easy.
But like, you know, it's interesting to me to see how, you know, I spent all this time struggling of how to figure out how to, you know, develop purposeful practice in a game like League where, you know, it doesn't seem clear to me as clear as music, but like there's still ways to make it clear, you know, through finding, you know, hey, what is it the thing that it's important here? Well, it's the positioning of 3 people relative to me. It's my HP values, right? Like, am I like how many times am I taking a trade with less than 80% HP or something, right?
Or
So it's like,
or with a
you can
greater
come up
than
with-
X HP differential even.
right. So like, you know, there's a whole bunch of like that's the biggest thing I'll take away is that like I can find metrics, I just have to
Yeah.
think about it for a second.
Everyone knows about how practice. Like everyone knows that well, no, not everyone. Most people know that they should be practicing on something, but most people don't know that they need to find metrics to know if their practice is
Right.
because
It doesn't matter how many
And
trades I
or
take and
most people
try to improve.
unconsciously create metrics, right? Like if you
Yeah.
get good enough at creating metrics
they get-
becomes an unconsciously competent skill, and you're just like, oh
Right.
yeah, I just focus on the skill and I get better at it. And at that point, that
Yeah.
is literally what you're doing. You know what I mean? It's like they're not lying to you. No, they're not. It's not. It's not that they're lying to you. That is actually their experience of what they're doing. They're just focusing on it, and it gets better. But B,
Yeah.
they are doing all of the things that you are trying to learn to do. It's just that they have them all in unconscious competence, and they no longer They no longer even realize that that's what they're doing because it's so deep in.
They, you know, they know so well that what they're doing that they don't even know how to explain it anymore.
Yep.
And you know, that's a big problem. I think that this book you mentioned, that's like it's expert amnesia or something like that, or it's like sometimes experts don't make good teachers because they forget the basics because the basics are so basic. That...
being a teacher is super hard.
And that is why Matt Thornton preaches that one should begin and end every single class with fundamentals because it keeps you aware of them and it's super fucking important for the beginners. And it's like, God, that guy's a genius. But he actually knows so much.
Important for you too, yeah.
It's important for you. It's like
he may not mention it that way, but like now that you think about it in terms of like expert amnesia, it's like obviously you need to be focusing on the basics if you want to teach the basics, right?
I swear, like like of all of the things that like I want a book club over, like Peak is up there because I think this is like really really cool. But then, like, the next two things that I want to do, after this. Matt Thornton and Josh Waitzkin. I think those are the two that I want to do.
Yeah, I'm super down for Josh Waitzkin.
Yeah. So,
I am hella down.
Yeah. We've got some stuff that I think we ought to fine-tooth comb over, and I think these are all going to be good.
Then in that case... Yeah. Going back to the metric thing.
Yeah.
What are your guys' opinions? Like, how do you determine using metrics to say, hey, now I can move on to the next thing? Because, like, for me in music, oftentimes what teachers will do be like, hey, if you play the same passage 3 times in a row without making a mistake, then you can move on. But, like, that's not really, like, because, like, playing it 3 times is cool and all, but it's like, is that really enough to master it? Or do you think it's, something else? That it's like, hey, I go 3 weeks without...
in a row is a good rule of thumb because it's easy to keep track of in the current moment. But what it really represents is it represents a certain rate of success. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're hitting 3 times in a row, having done it perfectly, it means that you are succeeding, I'll say, roughly 80% of the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so that's kind of my metric. Is if I'm looking at my games and I'm like leaving a paper trail for myself about how well I'm doing over a long period, and my success rate goes to 80%, yeah, it's about right. That's I think what I intuit. If I'm doing it 90% of the time correctly, then it's fine. I have it well enough.
And then if you move on and then notice that the thing is slipping, you go back and work on it some more?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so then it's like 80 to 90%. But, like, let's say that, like, 80 to 90% over how many trials, right? Because, like, if I, like, say I'm going to repeat it 10 times and I got it 80% of the time, it's like maybe...
If I've been working on it for at least 3 days, and it's at 80 to 90%, then I think it's fine. And by 3 days,
after
I mean
3 days, normally you don't have leaks after?
Usually for me, a day is like 1 play session, right? So if for 3 play sessions in a row, for 3 sets of 3 games, I've had 80% success rate, then it's fine.
That does make sense for, like, skills that are more fundamental. But rather, like, things that aren't fundamental, it may be harder to find metrics for those that you can really grapple with.
For sure. The other thing, too, is, like I'm saying about, like, this unconscious metrics thing, yeah, my metrics are pretty much completely unconscious. If you ask me to come up with one, I'll come up with one. But I'm not doing it consciously. I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to, like, work on that for a bit. Do. Okay, that seems like it's going better. I'm going to do something else. Like, it's completely unconscious. I have no well-defined system at all. I just do it.
So, think about that. It's like, for me, I think now... The reason that I keep switching between things is because I'd had no, solid metrics to think about all the things. Where it's like, for me, it's like, oh, I'm just going to work on positioning better, and it's like, well, and I know like cognitively positioning better means, hey, I need to have more protections on my flank. I need to have vision. I need to be able to sit in the right angle.
The skills, cognitively the skills that make up good positioning, but still.
But like when I'm practicing them in game, it's not like I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what's the possible best angle, and then like going through and like, okay, did I find the possible best angle, and what percentage of the time did I find it, and what percentage that I didn't, and why didn't I find it in those? I haven't gone that deep because it's like I never thought about those metrics in that way before, at least with League.
Yeah.
So, that helps me to really think about like, hey, there are a lot of little details that I'm not really thinking about in game or outside of game that I probably could be. That'll help me improve these things a lot faster.
And you have conscious awareness of them, but you're just not using that conscious awareness in your practice.
Yeah,
Correct.
indeed. Because I want my conscious awareness to be on the things that I need to win the game, whereas like I need to be okay with letting certain things slide and trolling them, quote unquote.
Yes.
So that I can improve on the things that I need to improve on, because those things obviously require more mental effort. The problem is that like
to invest in your improvement. You need to invest in loss.
Yep. Losses are an investment on your long-term game. That's what JJ says. The money lost is an investment on long-term, right? That's
right, and I cognitively understood that, but
but
it's really hard to invest in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to invest in games when you don't have the metric system to facilitate that progress, because it's like
because then you're just losing
I'm not getting better. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's terrible, right? If you're losing games and seeing no progress, oh geez, that's the worst, right?
And that's the problem I had, because I didn't have the metric system to think about it, right? So like now I have, I basically just taken all my things and now I have a metric, so that makes me that much more excited to get in the game and play and then look at my metrics. So for now, it's not about like, hey, do I win or lose the game, but rather, hey, do I win or lose my goal, right?
Yes, exactly.
My progress.
And metrics are what allow you to do that. And that's something that I don't think gets said enough in our current kind of sphere.
One could even say that metrics
especially
allow you to do that.
And it's especially because a lot of people view metrics as goals, because like, for me, if my goal is specifically to, so the difference between me saying I need to be able to position 80% of the time, and if I don't, then I feel like I failed the goal, but rather I want to get it as right as often as I can, because then the difference is that like, even if I get it right 0% of the time, if that was the most amount I can get it right, then that's fine. Whereas like, if I set myself to say I have to position right 80% of the time,
I don't think you would have been able to apply these, like the system of using metrics, if you had not already worked through your other mental game problems regarding.
Yeah, definitely as well. I agree with you that because I don't think I would have made the distinction that like the goal should be the best I can do and get it right as often as I can, rather than get it right X amount of times. Because at that time, because like for me at that point, getting it wrong every time was tantamount to being bad, rather than just being like, no, this is just my stepping stone right now.
Exactly. Truly internalizing and understanding what it means when somebody says it's okay to be bad. Being bad now doesn't mean that you're gonna be bad forever, and it doesn't mean that you're not working to get better. And
also
to be bad now is okay.
I think also not having the metric system made it so like, looking through those games, I was like, in the game I don't understand why I'm losing, so it just feels like I'm just like beating my head against the wall.
You're reviewing, but you're not doing anything in the review. The active ingredient of the review is missing.
Right, so then I go into the next game and the same thing would happen, and then I just feel really bad about it, but like, having that metric system gives me the ability to be conscious about it, I think, rather than like, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it does.
100%.
And it's something that's like, I think really big for me specifically, is that like, it's not that I can't be conscious, it's that like I didn't have anything to be conscious about.
So sounds like this, I would say, about wraps up the first 2 chapters of Peak.
Yep.
So how did this feel in terms of a format, right?
Absolutely great.
Kind of, I read through the couple of chapters. I took a bunch of notes on them. I picked out some important quotes, picked up some important kind of questions. figured out some ways in which it might relate to League, and then just kind of bring those as talking points, and then we just kind of go at it for a couple hours.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Well,
I like the fact that there's not
Same.
too limiting. I also like the fact that we can kind of bring other things in and even go off track for a little while.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really like the fact that we are only three actually.
Mhm.
That's
I think that having
I expected it to be actually like an issue, but it's actually the opposite.
Any more than 3 people would be so hard. Oh my god,
Yeah.
we would have so many things to talk
especially
about.
because I think that the 3 of us specifically would be the ones who are the most invested in something like this. So it's like
Yeah.
it's also really cool for
Oh,
us 3 to be able
No. Imagine adding Layla.
We would never get anywhere.
Imagine trying
yeah,
to get
he-
through
yeah, he
any
just-
points.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'd
shit.
be like, well, I'm gonna have to contest that because of my neurobiology knowledge. It's like,
Oof.
oh yeah, cool, sure,
Ooh.
all right.
Yeah. Mhm.
No, it's like cool that you do that, but
Layla, if you're watching, I love you.
I
XD.
love it.
XD.
Love you, man.
But yeah, so definitely it feels like the right size, feels like the right format for us, and it feels
Yeah,
like all 3 of us got some pretty good value out of it. So
Yeah,
One thing I
it
can
also
think we can
allows
do-
me to
Go ahead.
be playing like I'm playing at the same time on the Smurf account, and I was playing ARAM earlier. It's actually pretty nice to. I'm gonna die.
Now you know how I feel when I talk with Atherton and I'm playing at the same time. Hell yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I'm focusing on the conversation more than I'm focusing on the game.
Mhm. It'll
So-
help you really see where your unconscious competencies are and where the flaws are too.
Yes.
One thing I would think would be really cool though, like maybe next time, is to like maybe at the end, like maybe each of us should talk about the 1 or 2, 3 big things that we got out of each meeting.
Well, let's do that. What are the 2 or 3 big things
Wow.
that you got out of this meeting?
You go first, Dillium.
Wait a minute. Feels like I've been trapped. Hmm. I'm not sure. What are the biggest things? It's,
If you were to summarize what we talked about to someone else, what would you say?
No.
We didn't talk at all.
That was a secret meeting and no
It
report.
never happened.
That's the
It was a
Illuminati.
fiction. It was made up by a writer.
No, I usually I'm terrible at these exercises because I don't like have like major points. It's just the entire I cannot take in the entire conversation, and it's like adds up to my because I don't think there was anything that was like a breakthrough for me. So it's all like details on how I was viewing stuff. So
Well, what are some of the details that stood out to you?
that's the thing. So
Nothing really.
everything
Everything and nothing. All of it is
Yeah,
important.
exactly.
So none of it is important.
and probably wait. No, see if I was to sum it up, I'd say so. We first were talking about neuroplasticity in children. Like, is there anything in League that would be like relevant to that specific thing? And we talked about mechanics as being the main thing mostly, and also that we had no fucking idea.
Yeah. Mechanics is our best guess, but there might be other stuff and we have
Yeah.
no clue.
Then we went on to what was the direct follow-up to that? We talked about
We talked
well,
about talent versus
talent. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. We talked about
talent, ability, and
so
practice.
so none of it was like new to me. So I don't think I've taken like anything new particularly from that bit.
You knew all of
The
the
one
stuff
thing
that
I
I
will
was saying
say-
from my college course about how creativity is a process that involves.
I
a ton of
actually
people.
have had similar courses. Yes.
Nice. I like it.
And one thing I will say is that like I think a lot of us in this group particularly, and in my opinion, kind of undervalue the ability of the brain to automate almost everything. Like, we talk about how you can't automate certain things, but But then like the thing is like, you know, you go drive a car, and like you can automate everything to the point where like you're taking in the information and everything. You don't even remember the ride home, and the only time that you're like locked into your body is when you're like actually gonna die, and then that's when like something like you see a car like trying to hit you, you get immediately knocked out of your what's for dinner thought, and then you're immediately in the present right the fuck now, already instantly ready to do the thing, right? So it's like driving is a very much a complex skill that like people I think really underestimate how complex it actually is. But like the fact that we can fully automate driving,
who knows the best that is a complicated thing? People who work on autonomous vehicles, aka my dad. It is so
driving,
hard to drive, by the way. It's really, really tough.
like people who practiced it for 3-4 years can practice like drive so well that they don't even think about it unless they're about to literally die, right?
Yep.
So it's like, you know, in League, that tells me that, you know, it's probably possible for us to really automate even how do we take into account certain things. It's going to be much more difficult, probably because, you know, there's so many different situations just like in driving, but
I think that's a good takeaway. Yeah, the idea that everything is automatable. It's just a matter of figuring out how to automate it.
Is it like so? The question I'm going with is like for example, jungle tracking. Is it really automatable? Because that's
I think we just haven't figured out how to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is, and the reason I think it is because if you can automate driving and not even knowing where the other cars around you, but being aware enough.
Driving, you know everything, like you know what people are doing, like you know what people want to do because there are very constrained rules, except when someone's like trying to kill himself on the road, which is
right. So like, here's the point I'll make to that. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'm
Was that your point entirely?
No. My point was that it's. The constraints are like everything is expected, like you know where people are going to be, like you don't know when they will change lane or stuff, but it's all very clear in League of Legends.
It's not oppositional. Everyone's trying to play by the same
it's a
rules.
battle of wits. Like everyone is actively trying to fuck with the other's brain, is what I'm saying, and that's why I don't think it's automatable, because you always have to get into the other guy's brain.
So the thing is that what I'll say is that there's a theory going around, and it's not really a theory. It's about like situational awareness, and that like the things that we automate are things that we know are normal. So like we'll have a normalized idea of what's going to happen. Like what are the things that are going to happen at the base level that are normal, and then when things that aren't normal happen, that's when our automation kicks us out. So it's like a pattern recognition thing. So it's like, hey, this guy is swerving over into my lane. That's not a pattern I recognize. Let's wake up, right? So it's like, you know, maybe it's something like that in League, where it's like 95% of the time,
once you know to that the point where you can recognize all of the different possible moves from the enemy jungler, it no longer becomes a thing that's impossible to automate. It's just that there are a lot of them. There are a lot of different things that a jungler can do.
There's like also
so it's not going to become automatic anytime soon. But
these things are changing with the metas, right?
It can be automated, I think.
Like with every 2 week packs, with patches every 2 weeks, etc. It also makes it much harder, right?
I don't think that changes to jungle pathing happen every 2 weeks. I think that changes to jungle pathing happen every preseason when they change the jungle and they change the stance.
Every half season they do like change.
Yeah, it's like it really depends on the year, but it's like about every
it's like if you learn to analyze like a mid-season or a preseason change, and you have some model for even how to understand that, right? And then how to automate your relearning of jungle tracking, I think that it is possible to get good enough at learning a patch that you get to a point of unconscious competence with jungle tracking before the patch is done. I think that's possible.
Yeah, I think that's possible as well.
And I think that the big takeaway here is that like it's going to be about pattern recognition, and then like training yourself to basically go onto alert mode when the pattern recognition is busted. So it's like for driving, it's very easy to train that because your life's literally in danger. In League, that's not so much the case. So it's like, how do you go from being able to be unconscious competence and bring yourself back to consciousness when something unexpected happens?
You know, I fell asleep one time when driving. So is it actually about being always in danger?
Well, to be fair, to be fair,
ultimate edge case.
Yeah.
Fucking got him.
I'm
Dilgo is an
yeah,
outlier.
so
It
I-
shouldn't have been counted.
Because, like, you know, driving is such a routine for me that I actually have to try to stay focused to make sure sometimes I'll come home and not even remember the drive home and it'd be like, holy fuck, I actually don't even know what happened. Like, I couldn't tell you. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, in a
So
sense.
maybe it shouldn't be scary. Maybe it shouldn't be scary. Maybe I'm not trusting myself enough. But like, the idea of like you being around with a bunch of metal cars going 50, 60 miles an hour on a freeway, not remembering it's really fucking unsettling to me.
You know what often highlights that? When like there's like time travelers or people from other worlds in fiction works that come and see like fucking cars and they're like, are you actually fucking insane?
Yeah,
Got him.
yeah,
I'm like, yeah.
yeah. You have to
Yeah.
imagine like 1800. Like imagine like even in the early 20th century, people were like, holy shit, these things are death vehicles. Like, cause like people are getting run over because nobody cared, right? That's like.
Yeah.
And it's like, so what they did is instead of banning cars, they just made it illegal to walk on the road. Very little sense, right?
Instead of banning cars, they made it illegal to walk on the road. All right, that's one of my summary points.
Yep.
I mean,
Taking it as well. The fun thing is that it encompasses the entire discussion we just had, so it's pretty good. It's going to be a memory point of the entire discussion.
especially because it makes a lot of sense. It's like, why? If things are killing people, let's not ban the things that are killing people. Let's just make it so.
Let's just not make people go in front of the things that kill them.
Yeah, and it's like now
Don't
it's
try
actually
harder,
now it's
try
actually a
differently.
crime. Now it's actually a crime to walk on the road. It's jaywalking.
Mhm.
It's like, holy shit. But yeah, so I wanted to make that point because I know in the past that that's been like a real point of contention between us where it's like, what are automatable, what's not. And I'm definitely in the firm camp that it takes time to automate and maybe you'll never get there, but it's definitely possible.
I started
Yeah,
this conversation not there, and I am there now. I believe
Yeah,
everything
same.
is automatable.
Same, but I think one reason why it seems impossible is that as you move up the ELO brackets, it becomes different, right?
Yes.
So you cannot automate it entirely for all
Yeah.
the ELO brackets. You can only automate it for
Yeah.
like
For
the bracket you are at,
Right, 'cause,
and
like-
as soon as it's automated, it's not useful anymore because you're out of that bracket
Yep.
instantly.
And
Boom.
then what happens is like you'll go into a master game, play fine and win, and then you go into a bronze game and just like get hard stomped because like people who play it well.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a really
You have automated it. You have automated
Yeah.
your Yomi games, and then you go into low elo, and you throw your skill shots, and you lead them, or you like fucking predict that they'll like dodge back into them, and they fucking walk straight, and you're like, I can't play this game. I'm a failure of a human
Yep.
being. Everything that
yeah,
I've
like
done
wow,
is
I
wrong.
win in master and challenger by losing bronze. I'm so terrible.
I am awful. I must be. It's clearly that's why I've lost 6 games in Challenger just now. It's because I can't play in bronze. Yep. Understood.
But like it's such a different game, even going from bronze to silver. Because like
Yes.
in bronze, like people just stand still, they don't do anything, and then in silver, like they try, they fail, but they try.
Yeah.
And then gold, and
And-
sometimes get it right. Platinum, they're like,
In platinum, they always move, but the moves never make sense. Like in platinum,
Right,
they will
exactly.
always move and try to. No, I've been
Yeah.
playing like I've won earlier a game on Listen because my mid laner fucking banned the Camille that I was hovering, motherfucker. I had a terrible fucking early game. Like it was absolutely awful. Game should have been over. The enemy Jack's jungle was a Smurf, and he was so far ahead of me. And people just kept walking into each other, like being 2 or being alone or being 3. Like they were just walking. And when they saw enemy, they fought enemy. Monkey.
yeah, the
monkey
mental
see,
models in
monkey
gold
hear.
and platinum are like, I
Zero
see
click
guy,
hero.
I fight guy.
Yep.
Yeah,
Zero click
and
hero.
they're good at fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, like actually, like gold and
really
platinum
good.
players' fight mechanics are really insane, but like they just fight at the wrong stupid ass time. So like,
Yeah.
as long as you fight them when you know you win, you just win.
And that's exactly what I did. I was so far behind, and
And
I
it's
ended the
so
game like having
funny
15
how, like,
kills.
everyone's like, no, mechanics are the most important thing. because they're in
Yeah,
gold and they
fuck
see
no.
that the difference
Mechanics
between
are
them
so
and platinums
easy.
are mechanics, and then you get to platinum and people are like, no, macro is the most important thing, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it is up until you get to like diamond, and then it's actually the micro again, and it cycles back and forth, and people don't seem to like. People want there to be a one answer, and there's not one answer.
It's all about like
It's all of
the
it.
problem is that like it's not like music where it's like people have defined really well what level means you're good at what things, right? Or like in BJJ, for example, and so like in League, there's people in the same division that are really good at macro, really good at map awareness, really good at micro, but maybe not the other thing. So like you get this really weird mix of people who are all good at different things, and the game that is fucking weird.
And then on top of that, they're all good at different things, and they look at everyone else being bad at the things that they're good at, and they're like, God, everyone's terrible, when all of those other people are looking at them doing the things that they can do that the other guy can't do. And they're like, God, you're terrible too. And then so that everyone thinks that everyone else is bad, when in fact, all of them are like pretty darn decent.
Mm-hmm.
They know enough to be able to judge others, but not enough to be able to see that their judgments are wrong.
And then like, it's really weird too, because like, when you look at a platinum player and your mechanics are pretty good, but like, there's a difference between mechanics and micro, right? So it's like, their mechanics are good, but their micro is awful. So like, they don't know where to put themselves when, they don't know when to click, they don't know how to click. But they know how to press their buttons.
Exactly. Yeah, they know how to press their buttons in the right order in order to do to be efficient with the champion. They don't know how to play.
They know how to play their champions mechanically, micro, but they don't know how to play the game micro level, because like there's a big difference, in my opinion. Like one of the things that I'm a lot better at is like, I'm really bad at laning positioning, but like team fight positioning is clean as hell as long as I'm not super far behind. So it's like, it's just like a point where it's like, I can basically play any AD carry mid to late game and still hard win, but my laning micro is so bad that it's like, I can't play any AD carry in lane.
Yeah. Well.
And it took me a long time to, figure out all those things as far as like, micro mechanics being different, and then like, hey, even mechanics at different points in the game can be a lot different too. But yeah, so.
All right, well, here's my summary. Here's my things that I learned. Number one, I will say, same as Dilga, that idea that, probably mechanics is the thing that's easier to learn when you're a younger person, or maybe it's different as you get older. But certainly, I don't think that there's anything in League that you can't learn as you get older. I think that almost everything in the game, you are still perfectly fine to learn and to play and to compete.
To that point, there are 30-plus-year-old people playing CSGO and still being the best in the world, which sort of elucidates that point and makes it even more valid. It's just that people in League and in StarCraft and other games think that reaction times are more important, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think it's a game of like 90% decision making, and that's not even hyperbole. Like, I think it's literally 90%.
I agree.
So there's that. I would say another really big takeaway is I had no idea that you didn't use metrics. And that was something that I was unconscious that I was doing that you weren't doing, and so that's kind of a takeaway for me.
It's funny because I do it for music, but in like music, metrics are so much clearer to me.
It was something that was so unconscious to me that I did it, that I didn't realize that other people couldn't do it, and so that's now something that I can apply in my coaching. Is like, that's a question I am now going to start asking: is, do you have metrics and do you use them?
Well, that's great. I feel good. I feel good that we helped. I hope. I mean.
I think another thing is everything's automatable. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take, and is it and like we said too, is it going to be the same skill that you need when you move up in an elo bracket, right? So it's like the game is different not only between every single game, but also it's different between elo brackets, and also they keep patching it. So like the entire thing of League is that it's kind of designed to be difficult to automate. And I think that's what keeps it so interesting.
And I think
it never gets
that actually makes sense. I've never considered it that way, but yeah.
I mean,
It stays interesting because you can't automate it because they keep changing it and because it's so different.
It's why the pros are also so much better. It's because they have the best deliberate practice time. Like they have the most time and the best quality every time. So every time anything changes, they are the first ones that get to figure it out because they have the staff and the environment.
And then I think also too, what's really important is that like they always have to practice 2 patches at the same time, one for solo queue, one for pro. And so like not only do they have to adapt, but they have to adapt in between. Yeah,
they have to be able to switch.
So like that probably helps them a lot too. Whereas like they're getting a lot better at adapting just because.
Yep. Because
it is like pros complain. Yeah, pros complain the shit out of it. So.
Imagine playing in the LPL where you're like 2 or 3 patches behind.
Yeah, imagine playing like MSI or World and you're like 4 patches behind solo queue and you still have to play solo queue as part of your contract.
Yikes.
Third and final point. Purposeful practice versus naive practice is a huge fucking deal. It is very important. And I am going to be continuing to dive into the differences between naive practice and purposeful practice and trying to kind of apply my mental model of like the differences between them to my students. You know, you guys, I'm going to be looking at the way that you practice, and I'm going to be asking like, is there a way that we can make this more purposeful? Right?
That'll be good for me because I'm not good at determining those things outside of music. So,
so I think those are my major takeaways.
Okay.
No, my major takeaways are the metrics thing. For sure.
Yes.
And I think that the other thing I wrote down that I like the idea of encoding the game, of like perhaps it's not about looking at more things; it's about economizing the things that you're looking at so they take up less brain space.
Seeing more with the same things, right?
Right.
Using
because like when you were talking about
make map awareness in specific a different thing than it has been.
Because when you guys were talking about red buff topside starts for junglers, you thought red buff topside, and you instantly thought of like 30 different things, right? Whereas for me, it's like I think one thing. Whereas like, so it's like, you know, how do I learning how to take the things and figure out how to make them smaller and more efficient, so that like instead of having, because my working memory is already limited based on the fact that I have ADHD.
This is 500 mil.
Yeah. True, and that's a big
my
problem.
Dad's like, this is 500 milliliters. He's talking about your working memory, actually.
Yeah. So it's like, how do I economize that? So like, I mix up all the liquids so that the 500 milliliters is a billion different liquids rather than 1 or 2.
Exactly.
So that's something I'll definitely work with. And then the other thing was the idea of progressive resistance and applying the idea of like making it harder.
Good one, yeah.
Through like maybe practice tooling it slowly and then speeding it up. Or even like, say for example, what Faker does and blowing mana halfway to lane so that he starts lane with half mana instead of full mana. So that way he starts with an inherent disadvantage and figures out how he can still win. And figuring out like how could I bring those things into my practice as well. So like, maybe perhaps for positioning, I can maybe give myself 10 seconds to figure out the right position or something. And then if I can't, then like maybe I'll spend more time and then like, hey, the faster I can get to the right position, like the faster, like, progressively make it so that I have to recognize faster will, help me and recognize those things in real time and encode it better.
Yep.
So like incorporating those things into my analysis, I think will really help.
That was something that I used to do when I was training people to do composition analysis, is I would ask them to like, I had some metrics that I was judging them by, it's like, identify the win conditions for both teams and like, who's the most important person on both teams to gank for, right? And I would like have people identify that, and I would ask them to do it in like the duration of your metric of whether or not you have it down or not is whether or not you can do it during a loading screen. That is the speed that you need to be able to do it at. So,
and also, that's a purposeful practice thing that probably should come back, to be honest.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Also, the last thing is, like, the difference between naive, purposeful, and deliberate, where it's like, what we're doing is not deliberate practice because there's not a framework that's widely accepted. It's going to be purposeful only, no matter what, at this
Yeah.
point, and that's totally okay.
Yep. We are still figuring it out. We are the bleeding edge right now.
But then, like, at the same time, it's also like, you know, we've come really far, even just in one session. So it's like,
Yeah.
Can't wait to see how the club comes out for, you know, every week. So
Yeah. I think it's
I'm going to be sticking with it.
How does the pace of 2 chapters a week sound for
Good.
this club?
I think that 2 chapters a week, given how long we dedicated to each chapter, and I know that the introduction was smaller than a normal chapter, so, you know, maybe 2 chapters is too much, but I don't think there's ever a world in which we do more than 2 chapters.
Yeah, more than 2 seems literally impossible. 2
Yep.
seems like a lot. Would we like to try to do 2 or 1 for next week?
So what I think we might do is maybe set up for 2, and then, like, maybe we should give ourselves, like, 2 hours max, so that we don't just, like, go heavily overboard. Maybe dedicate, like, a certain amount of time to each chapter.
Because this ended up being almost 3 hours. We started at 4, and it's now 6:45. So
Which is cool. Like, a long time is fine, but, like, you know, maybe we
I
need
think
to
a
think
smaller
about
time
how to...
commitment is probably a better thing.
Right,
So
exactly.
let's go for 1 chapter next week. I think actually. I think that as we get more and more into it, like there will probably be enough to talk about over 1 chapter.
And then,
So,
as also we get through more books and more, you know, weekly things, we'll figure out, like, a good pacing as well.
Yeah.
And that won't even have to be a problem soon.
sure. And actually,
you
you
wanna
know what?
do-
Maybe
you wanna
how
know a
about
joke?
this? How about this? How about this?
I have cleared 2 camps at 5 minutes in the game, and I'm like really ahead of my opponent.
God damn it.
He's cleared 1 camp at 5 minutes.
Brilliant. So,
Camille, by the way.
yeah, that sounds freaking accurate. Stupid fucking champion. How about actually? I think you're right. Let's make sure that we don't have too little to talk about. Let's read and make notes for 2 chapters
Yeah.
every week.
Next time
But-
I'll
But
make notes.
once we finish talking about the first chapter, just go ahead and call it, like, you know, do we want to continue or do we want to stop for the week? You know, like, was it you know, a light chapter? Do we want to go for 2 or do we want to just call it for 1? So
Definitely.
that sounds like the way to do it. So we'll prep 2 chapters for next week. We'll prep chapters 2 and 3, and we'll see how much we can get through in 2 hours.
Okay. Yeah, let's just go and make it a hard stop 2 hours.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds
All
good to
right.
me.
I will see
Yep,
you
same.
2 next week. Fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I'll see you before then. But yeah, really fun stuff.
Yeah, it was really fun. No, thanks. I made a lot of little mental connections here that I didn't make when I originally read it, so super excited.
So sick. This is why I've been wanting to do a book club. I'm telling you, it's the future. This is the
Yeah, it's
real
pretty
way
good,
to read
but-
books.
It was a lot more valuable than I
Yes.
thought it would be.
Same. And well, I've been doing that like in school for a while. You know, like I have one teacher for history of technology that literally his entire class at some point was just that. It didn't start off at that, but he just fucking got us the authors, told us you read these pages and we'll just talk about it for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And it was so good.
It is the best. So, you know, I feel like if we work through like the most important materials we've discovered, you know, then as a group, I think we're going to start making connections and seeing things that we can't see by ourselves, and I think it's going to elevate the server as a whole. So,
I agree completely.
grand success. I needed one of those.
Definitely. I agree.
Compared
It's
to last
really-
week where you were like completely disheartened because
I
no
was
one
worried
showed
going
up.
in. I'm not going to lie. I was worried going in, but we got there. All right.
Oh,
I'm gonna
because
go
of
ahead and
the
turn off the
scheduling
stream.
problems?
Yeah.